And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. We're going to tell a couple tonight. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, CoalitionRadio.us, and of course our all apolitical anti-billionaire baseball boys club Twitter feed at Pawtucket is Home, where just last week we had Grant Welker from the Worcester Business Journal on give us a 2-hour plus provocative conversation of what's really going on, or what we're wondering is going on, what's in the water in Worcester, as they gave away $100 million for a failing minor league baseball team. We'll continue to monitor developments on that. Ultimately, I don't really believe it's a done deal until they break ground, and even maybe then. So tonight we're going to cover a couple local issues. Joining me later in the show, Darrell Gould. He's running for the General Assembly in Barrington and Warren. Next week, 6 o'clock here, steel cage death match, salad oil wrestling, the interview of all interviews, Joe Trillo, and as he calls me, Dr. Doom, live on the air for 1 hour. We'll talk issues. We've put aside any personal animus. We are not going to handicap the general governor's election. As we all know, one of the rules here on the Coalition is we want to know why you should win, not if you're going to win. So we'll let all the other, hey, what's my favorite color today, talk radio stations, dripping in outrage porn, obsessing over the latest headlines, and wondering if Joe will throw the election. If not, Joe will throw the election. To hell with that. That's not what we do here. We'll be talking about issues. And no one comes to the table more issue-laden and on top of more perspectives here on the state than our next guest. She's a frequent contributor to a number of political organizations here in the state. I would describe her as a Renaissance woman who is actively involved in a variety of organizations working to make the state just simply better, and connecting with people in the environment, women's issues, defense issues, truly a provocative, or shall I call her an agent provocateur here in the state of Rhode Island. Tonight she's representing Keep Rhode Island Beautiful. We're going to do something we haven't done in quite a while, and that's we're going to have an update on Invenergy. Of course, I'd like to introduce, for the second time on the show, Alicia Ann Kelly. Alicia, welcome back to the Coalition.
Well, thank you so much for your platitudes. I really appreciate it, and that's always giving a venue for us to talk about 38 power plant, as I like to call it.
38 power plant.
So, a lot of good news this week for us up in Burrillville in the northwestern quadrant.
Well, if you could just give folks a background on Keep Rhode Island Beautiful,
sure.
And where there's a sort of a patchwork quilt of political organizations that have been acting, I think, in a uniquely team-like spirit to fight the ongoing encroachment of legacy power generation into really what should be considered sacred, pristine land in the northwest corridor of the state. So give us a little background on where Keep Rhode Island Beautiful fits in on that.
Sure. So Keep Rhode Island Beautiful is a grassroots organization of people throughout the state. I'm from Scituate myself, that have decided to come together and speak to the issue of the power plant siting up in Burrillville. Yes, the majority of membership is from Burrillville, but we have folks from Cranston, Woonsocket, all the way down to the center part of the state. Because this truly is a statewide issue, Keep Rhode Island Beautiful, along with the Burford Land Trust, No New Power Plant, another organization I'm a part of, Our Revolution Rhode Island, we've really come to the table to discuss energy policy throughout the state. You may have seen our green map, which is the majority of Rhode Island passing a resolution at the municipal level opposing the siting of the Clear River Energy Center, or CREC as some people call it. So it's really, like I said, boots to the ground, grassroots, going to get things done for the state organization that I'm a part of.
Excellent. So we're with huge more developments this week, but running into this week, where had things generally stood with Clear River?
Sure. So this has been a 3 3-year process since Invenergy came on from Chicago. They are a Chicago-based company. Clear River Energy Center, like many other LLCs, is based in Delaware. We can talk about that for hours, why that's like that. But throughout the last 3 years, there's been a siting process by the Energy Facility Siting Board, which is a 3-person board appointed. It's the head of the PUC, I believe the head of the DEM, and then the associate director of planning. So these are positions that they run their organizations by the pleasure of the governor, so they're appointed positions, and they have to cite large-scale projects in the state of Rhode Island. So for the last 3 years, we've been working along with many other organizations for advocacy of this project. We've had public hearings. There have been municipal public hearings for planning and zoning, and there have also been hearings on bills at the State House regarding EFSB legislation. So in the last 6 months or so, everything has come to a head. We've had our last public hearings. Now it's finally the final hearings. So what the final hearings are similar to a case, you know, at a courthouse, in that there's no public input. It is literally witnesses being cross-examined by Invenergy, the Conservation Law Foundation, and the town of Burrillville. So that's been happening for the last, throughout the summer. They did start at in late spring, and now we're starting to really get going with those final hearings. Another thing I'd like to point out is the Scituate Reservoir has been deemed by way of the town of Johnston to be the prime water source. So what that means is there's a spigot in Johnston that they're going to fill up some tankers, some water tankers, drive it all the way up through our state roads in the middle of winter, and we're going to cool down the power plant by way of truck. I don't know of any other power plant off the top of my head, and I know a lot about them now because I've kind of been forced to, that's how their turbines are being cooled. The second part of that that's interesting is the city of Fall River, across the bay, you have to take, you know, 2 bridges to get over there. They've also been seen as the secondary water source, and we've actually been to Fall River and talked with a myriad of people, Our Revolution, Massachusetts, a couple of their memberships, like Erica Scott and Steve Camara. They've truly been allies in this and discussing with their city officials about how this isn't a good deal for anyone. Fall River, they actually didn't know about it until a member of our community reached out to them. There have been Attorney General OMA violation requests. And so it's been a really long process, but things are coming to a head. We're finally at the final hearings, and then at that point, once the EFSB makes their decision, of course there is opportunity to appeal, but we're in the home stretch now.
Now, a couple notes from station management here, if you'll. That's me. It should be noted that the Governor Gina Raimondo, who's, as you pointed out, the Energy Facility Siting Board, serves at her pleasure, has received significant campaign contributions from the CEO of Invenergy, as well as super PACs related to big energy. Is that correct?
Yes. So the CEO of Invenergy has given the maximum contribution limit, which I believe is $1,000 per year, to the governor when this process started 3 years ago. Another thing I really want to mention here is we have collated so well that this plant should have been sited, and the shovel's in the ground, I believe, last summer. So despite the influx of money, the super PAC money, and so on and so forth from energy companies, this plant is not built, so this plant is not sited, this plant is being delayed. And I think that that's a true testament of public input and public knowledge about the devastation of what this plant means, both environmentally and economically.
Right. So, you know, we roll forward. By the way, what is Governor Raimondo's statement about the process?
She says, trust the process.
Trust the process.
Yes.
Right. During the primary, in the primary versus Mr. Dickinson and Mr. Brown, did she, she's famous or infamous now for her refusal to debate. Do you think, in your own personal opinion, did the ongoing issues with Invenergy contribute to her refusal to debate Mr. Brown in particular?
I think it's a really vulnerable spot for her. For instance, the Sunrise Movement, which is a across the country movement of college-age students that ask for politicians and for aspiring politicians to sign an attestment that they won't take money from fossil fuel companies. They have approached the governor several times asking her to take this pledge, and you would think as an environmental champion she would sign such a thing, but she's refused to do so. Whenever she's approached about the matter regarding Invenergy, she will turn her heel and walk away. She has slammed, and it's recorded by Steve Alquist, that they made a request asking, can you please sign this pledge, we're your constituents, and she has refused to do so. So yeah, I think that it's a really sore spot for her, and anyone who is, going to debate her, like, Mayor Fung or, former Representative Trillo, I would ask her, or bring it up. Why wasn't an environmental impact study made? Why are you not talking to this matter? Because she avoids it so much.
There's almost two Gina, well, in so many cases this is true, but there's two Gina Raimondos. There's the Gina Raimondo who will issue edicts from the throne that we will accomplish this in terms of alternative energy usage, we will accomplish that, which are rather toothless, quite frankly. They're proclamations. And
they're executive orders for the most part.
Right, which no one's going to follow up on. Yet at the same time, you've got evil Gina, who is clearly, and again, my words, I don't want to reflect any of my personal attitudes onto your organization, but is clearly willing to sell out, for a few shekels of the king's gold. It's astonishing, people sometimes wonder all their lives what someone's word is worth. And for Gina Raimondo, it's $1,000. That's pretty cheap goings.
Sure, and I think it's also important to remember that these mailers that came out, they were fueled by a super PAC where their chair or their biggest contributor, I believe, was Samsung Energy. And if you're not familiar with Samsung Energy, they specialize in offshore drilling.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't have it both ways. I can understand from a strategy point needing money for mailers, and perhaps this is the only people that would give her money, but she did send, when the federal government was going to do offshore drilling, she sent a representative down to the hearings to say no, but is also taking money by a super PAC that has ties to the energy community.
And I believe that was somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000.
Correct.
Which is a whole lot of dough. So you've got a governor who is, again, my words, clearly compromised in terms of her actual performance on this issue. And I don't want to obsess over Gina Raimondo here, but short of proclamations and edicts and, whatever, you and I are, I think, probably similar background. When I think of edicts, I think of, who was the, Dolores Umbridge? Was the
yes, from Harry Potter, yes.
Was the head of Hogwarts, and Crookshaft was putting up edict after edict after edict until eventually the whole building came down.
Yes.
I have this mental image of her with,
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, Dolores Umbridge was pretty gnarly, but I think it's important to remember that energy policy is an important part of our state. Offshore wind is a significant potential for us. I did support Matt Brown in the primary, and I think one of the reasons why I did was his innovative ideas about energy policy, that we would be able to use our assets for everyone in the state. And I really hope that the Raimondo administration would consider such innovative ideas, because it's really easy to pick that low-hanging fruit and say, I support renewable energy, these are the things that I want to do, but we really need a leader who will lead. At the federal level, Tulsi Gabbard has introduced legislation called the Off Fossil Fuel Act, which is a complete stop of fossil fuel energy production by 2035. And a lot of people say that that's significant and a reach. But the Navy has also said that they want to have 50% renewable energy by 2020. The Department of Defense is saying that this is a threat to our nation's interests. So that leadership is happening, and I'd love to see it more here in Rhode Island.
Right, and I'm not making light of this, but I think we've all seen the frailties at this point this past week, and really what was a tragedy of the most extreme notions of, I'll put it this way, government monopolies given to energy companies who do not have to compete in the marketplace for either price or safety, putting a dangerously compromised grid in place for natural gas. And all one has to do is travel to Andover, Massachusetts to see exactly. Let's go down the rabbit hole for just a second. We just had a scant 60 miles away from here, in excess of 100 homes, to varying degrees, let's be blunt, blown up.
Yeah, look, I can't disagree with that. And we've had here in South Providence, we've had similar, not devastating to that extent, but we've had similar instances of gas leaks, of explosions. It's a significant risk to our communities, and even now, we're having people say, it's getting colder. I don't have heat. I don't have hot water. The malpractice that happened in Andover was significant, and I think it's important that we hold National Grid and the other groups accountable to make sure our infrastructure is straight, and it's not in a lot of areas right now.
Right. I'm confused as to why an event like that, and I'll just say for the most superficial reasons, just the event on its face didn't garner more media attention. We just had 60 miles away, somewhere in excess of 100 homes obliterated in what was a scene described. And I listened that night to WBZ, Dan Ray, and if you're ever looking for great late night radio, WBZ 10:30 a.m., Dan Ray, interview homeowners who described the scene as something akin, and I'm not being facetious, right out of a Bruce Willis, disaster movie.
It was an inferno.
You had homes, because of just random chance and flaws in perhaps of the slightest degree, obliterated. How is that not international news?
I will say this, my friends across the country did reach out to me and say, wow, we're seeing on the news, how close are you to Massachusetts? Well, I'm hop, skipping, and jumping away. And I will note, Projo did report on last year's report about similar, like I said, less devastating. It was controlled incident here in Providence. So I think it was a big wake-up call for a lot of people.
Well,
there's a lot going on up there as far as trade labor as well. The National Grid is perhaps compromising safety,
right.
And it's not a great policy to have, to be relying on volatile things. Oil doesn't go boom, gas does.
Right, and Monica Hertes from No LNG and PVD is doing yeoman-like work, if you will, at great personal risk, I believe, just in terms of her, no one's threatening her, but it's just in terms of quality of life, to raise the safety issues. At last week, a week or so ago, we had water fire, and in addition to climate change activists in the Rhode Island area putting on a significant show of strength, you also, as you mentioned, had trade unionists pointing out in some similar audiovisual techniques across buildings in Rhode Island that complaining about the Greed's safety record. And wow, so it's coming from a variety of sources. We can no longer seek to marginalize individuals because their political narrative may be different from yours. You're seeing a broad section of America, and I want to point out, Scientific American documented that last year the development and construction of alternative energy projects for the first time were larger than legacy-style energy projects. The future is now, and we must embrace it. And you know, you and I agree and disagree on different issues. It's funny, but you understand my free market approach to everything. I say let's do what we can to diminish this terrible monopoly that certain, interestingly enough, and this is almost, in a sense it is, in a sense it isn't, not germane to the issue, but they're international corporations who have no real vested interest in the community. Not that businesses have to, but there's no connection to the community whatsoever. And there's really no sense of responsibility to provide a safe product at a lower price. There's no competition at all.
That's a really good point. So National Grid actually, you know, they're based in Britain. I have friends across the pond that when I talk about National Grid, they just can't help.
We call it the greed. We call it the greed here.
We call it the greed.
Okay.
But there are no small energy companies in this area anymore. You have EverSource, you have Columbia Gas, and they have wide swaths of land. So there is no more, you know, Narragansett Electric Company that I remember as a child. There's no more Providence Gas Company. Actually, interestingly enough, in Burrillville, they have their own utility districts in Pasco. When things happen and infrastructure gets ruined or, you know, damaged, their power is usually up before anyone else is. And it's because it's much easier to control things like this when you have it around the community that you serve. How can someone in Britain know the needs of New England or New York?
Well, and it's fascinating to me because, again, as a libertarian, both in Pasco and in my case, I live about 150 yards away from lower taxes, better schools, and twinkling lights during the worst of storms. And that is, of course, the North Attleboro Electric Company. You can always tell the border in a bad storm. In Rhode Island, as I always say, we employ an earth-friendly, holistic method of snow removal. We simply let it melt. And then in addition to that, you've got, like I said, in North Attleboro, you can see folks in, you know, Christmas card-like pictures, the snow coming down heavily, and their bright lights and their fires off in the distance. And we just are like this at the window of the state border going, please, sir, may I have some more? Those organizations are not, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, I'm going to do some more research on this, are not quote-unquote taxpayer subsidized. They manage to be competitive and locally owned. It's time really to encourage, you know, and I know that one of the candidates for lieutenant governor was embracing this. You know, it's time that we as a community stop producing barriers to entry to independent local energy generation and let the marketplace decide if they're going to be competitive or not. And in the case of North Attleboro and Pasco, by all accounts, it appears to be not only competitive but superior.
Yes, and it's funny you mentioned that because even, you know, as we have smaller companies like Ambit, you still ultimately sell your energy back to the grid. So and then it gets regurgitated and you can potentially have some cost savings. But if you look at your energy bill, you'll notice it's actually your transmission fees can be more expensive. So for instance, I live alone, or have lived alone, and I don't use a lot of energy. I'm pretty conscious about what I'm using, and at times my transmission fee was higher than the actual energy I used. And so that transmission fee, I feel a lot of it is the cost of doing business, and we're passing that on to the ratepayer. Actually, right now, what's interesting too is Invenergy is actually profiting off of the power plant, even though it hasn't been built yet.
All right, hold that thought for a second because I just want to take a break on the half hour. You're just joining us. Alicia Ann Kelly is of Keep Rhode Island Beautiful. In addition to a number of other organizations, she is a community activist of the highest grade, active in campaigns, boots on the ground, information processing, energy warrior, just again, one of those folks who, and as we like to say on the show, hashtag takes it very, 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 very personally. This hour is sponsored by a good friend of the show, Yacht Club Beverage, just introducing tonight, and they introduce locally their new grapefruit seltzer, which clearly works for me. It's delicious. It's made from real pink grapefruit extract. Imagine that. It's salt-free, sugar-free, no artificial sweetener. The water from their own source right at the bottling facility in Centerdale, Rhode Island. As we like to say, it's Rhode Island's boutique soda before, well, we even knew we needed boutique soda. Alicia, you're having a root beer, right?
Yes, I am.
Great stuff. So, it's football season, right? So everybody's having football parties. Whether it be a Patriot fan, if after last night you can still consider yourself a fan of Gang Green, i.e. the New York Jets, or the New York Football Giants, whatever it is you're going to put on a spread for the game, you're going to invite friends over, or maybe you're going to visit friends who are putting out the spread. So home-cooked meals, great local wines. Don't drink the refinery sodas. Yacht Club Soda, 100-plus year tradition. In fact, on the new label design, they are the official Rhode Island soda, as deemed by the fine people up at Halitosis Hall by our General Assembly. So drink the very best. Again, I'm trying the grapefruit seltzer in a homage to two people who inspired me, and I won't dignify this with the term career, but who inspired me to go into the media. Philippe and Jorge. Next week we'll have plenty of Pernod here so we can have Pernod and grapefruit seltzer. Here's to Philippe and Jorge. So we are back. We were just about to go into a discussion of how, I'm going to sit back and just drink this in, if you will, because, I caught wind of this, and I didn't have a chance to really read much into it. It's been a nutty week here. But Alicia Ann Kelly of Keep Rhode Island Beautiful is going to explain to me how, despite being just a gigantic roadblock to basic human decency and democracy in the greater Boroughville community, as I say, Pasco, the Paris of Northwest Rhode Island, how, despite being a failure at every level, despite ignoring even the most fundamental rules of, okay, I wanted to ask before, tractor trailers driving through a pristine forest with water in the middle of the winter, given that they're Rhode Island roads. We asked the official question of the Coalition Talk Radio, what could possibly go wrong? So you're going to explain to us how they're making money.
Sure. So again, this is more energy policy than environmental concerns, but energy policy is something I'm truly interested in. I've testified at the State House about it. There's an organization called ISO New England. They are the organization that purchases energy for the grid. And so every year there is a forward capacity auction. And during that auction, companies say, I have an allotment of energy that I'd like to sell to you. For instance, right down the street we have an energy facility, Manchester Street Power Station. They would sell to the auction. Ocean State Power, which is also in Burrville, they're a peaker plant, but they would also sell energy. Solar would sell energy. You would also have Deepwater Wind could sell energy. So it's an auction. You put your energy up to bid. And so it's important to note that Clear River Energy, or Invenergy's power plant in Burrville, there are two turbines, CREC 1 and CREC 2. And so when they have gone to auction every year, they have secured a CSO to be able to supply energy to the grid, and they get paid for it. And it's only been for that first turbine. Turbine number 2 has not been sold, period.
Right.
So how is Invenergy making money with this CSO if the power plant isn't built? Well, you have to, if you can't make your obligation, your CSO is an obligation. You have to fill energy. You can sell off your CSO to another organization, another power plant. So let's say the power plant down the road, they have extra energy capacity. You can, as another energy company, say, hey, you have extra energy, why don't we make an agreement and we'll buy the energy from you and move it to the grid. And you can make money off of that. And that's what Invenergy is doing. They have sold their first CSO, or rather they were making money. We'll get to that in a second though, but they were making money. They've made over $22 million so far.
Whoa.
Yes.
So just as an aside, with $22 million, you can fund lobbyists, you can fund PR activities,
There's a lot you can do with $22 million.
especially here in Rhode Island.
And that's ratepayer money, because the ratepayers are buying that energy.
Right. So you've effectively created this mythical. It's sort of like selling tax credits in a sense. You've created this mythical asset.
That's essentially what it is. It's like a tax credit.
Right. So this mythical asset takes on a life of its own, which you then can sell because the government has decided that they're going to bless you with this. They're going to allow this to happen. So.
I believe it's the Fed. So it's the Federal Energy.
The
FERC.
FERC, yeah.
Yeah, FERC.
We had a member of the
FERC.
FERC 4 here a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Professor Dr. Peter Nightingale. So we create this vapor asset, which then can be sold because you're large enough to overcome the barriers to entry to the free marketplace, simultaneously using the structured energy market we have right now to sell to consumers or to include in your rates, and the consumers have absolutely no control over that.
Correct. And what's interesting beyond that mind-blowing concept, which is infuriating, we don't know what this other facility is. It's redacted information in the EFSB docket. So we don't even know, is it this power plant down the street? Is it Dominion's power plant? Is it a power plant up in Maine? It can't be Braden Point because that one's gone. But you know, what plant is it coming from? Because if they have excess energy, then why are we building another power plant?
Right. And that's always been the contention that, in fact, if there's a curve, the curve for the demand for additional is ever downward. Now, what people will say is, now, okay, we're going into the winter. And folks will continue to conflate the increase in the cost of energy with the need for new capacity. What do you say to that?
What's interesting is, you know, these forward capacity auctions I was talking about where you put your energy up to bid. The last FCA, there were no new bids accepted for any fossil fuel plants. So for instance, Killingly Energy Center, Killingly is very similar to Burville in that they already have a power plant.
Right.
And they're trying to build another one because it's all across the Algonquin pipeline. So they tried to sell their power plant energy, and ISO said no. So none of their turbines were bought, and Invenergy's second was not bought as well. So the argument there is, ISO New England, it is literally their job to make sure there's enough energy for all of us, and they did not buy turbine number 2 of Crack, and they didn't buy anything from Killingly Energy. So I'm not really sure where the argument is for there's a need for this, because they've only bought one turbine. And now let's get to the next bombshell, which is the CSO that is the obligation. At yesterday's EFSB final hearing, lead attorney Michael Blazer announced to the crowd and to the Energy Facility Siting Board, the CSO, ISO New England has requested to FERC to cancel the CSO. So what that means is that one turbine that they've been able to secure selling off the energy for, ISO New England said enough is enough. This isn't a reliable project. You're selling off the obligation to another company. Unprecedentedly, they have decided to cancel. This has never been done before. It's significant, and it's basically, it's turned the faucet off for Invenergy to be able to make a profit. Because if they can't sell their CSO, then they're not making money. So a lot of people are saying that this is the killing blow. I think we've been fighting this for 3 years, and in my opinion, it's not over until the fat lady sings, and she hasn't sung yet.
Right.
But we've come to a point where ISO New England doesn't even want to deal with it. The need isn't worth it for them. The proverbial need.
Right.
Because because they won't even buy it anymore.
So essentially, the industries, the northeastern air traffic controller, for lack of a better term,
Sure.
the people who act as a good faith broker,
The gatekeeper, yes.
right, to make sure that the lights are on everywhere, have said no mas. We're done. There's no, effectively, there's no market in terms of real dollars for any of the Invenergy product at any level.
Well, what it's saying is you haven't been able to make good on your obligation. Yes, you've been able to sell your obligation to other power facilities, but you haven't been able to build your power plant. And as we're dwindling down in the final hearings, it's not looking great. That Situate Reservoir water deal that was talking about earlier, that's being contested in Superior Court. I believe there may be a decision on that on Monday.
Wow.
Maybe. That's what the speculation is. Nothing's on paper yet.
Mm-hmm.
Before Judge Silverstein retires. And that's a monumental part of this too. And I think that's part of the reason why I got so involved. Was the people of Burrillville, they've gone to every other community. Woonsocket, they were trying to sell the water in Woonsocket to cool down this plant. And then that same day that Woonsocket said no, Johnson said yes.
What?
And now we're here. Fall River yesterday, they've decided that they will not be continuing their water contract beyond what is currently in place. The Narragansett Indian tribe, months ago, they said we're done. So Invenergy was being powered by being able to get money from the CSO,
right.
And now they've just lost their life.
It's truly a house of cards.
Yes.
A paper entity. And by the way, just as an aside, I always want to remind people this. Burrillville, and this is why I've become more strident against incrementalism, because years ago there was a group of hardy environmentalists who objected to really the first stroke in this jigsaw puzzle, which was the processing facility there,
The compressor station?
Exactly, thank you. The compressor station. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but in a sense, because the compressor station, this seems to be how it works. And it's true of whether you're a casino, a baseball stadium, a prison, or a power plant. You break in somehow. If you kind of somehow break through that tiny chink in the armor and you get your hands literally into the pie, as the compressor station did, the existence of the compressor station and the Algonquin pipeline has been what's essentially justified in these people's minds this continuing stealth increase in production, this continuing case of environmental racism, this continuing incursion into this area where clearly the people in the community who have in many cases, multi-generations, have a significant investment in this.
Sure. So the compressor station is and still is a significant issue for people in Burrillville. That thing is just disruptive. It sounds at times like an airplane is in your backyard. It's important to note that the Algonquin pipeline runs pretty much along the Rhode Island-Connecticut border. It goes into Burrillville, and then it exits back out through Uxbridge. There is another line as well that kind of intersects in Burrillville. So the power plant that's there right now, Ocean State Power, which is on the other side of the town, when they were going through the siting process 30 years ago, they were looking for a place to put the power plant. And normally EFSB requires, I stand corrected, usually you want to see where in the area it's good to put a power plant, right? Like, do you want to put it in the middle of Buck Hill where there's hundreds of environmental concerns? Do you want to put it up off of Route 7? Do you want to put it next to Bryant University, because that was a place that they were considering as well? And 30 years ago, I believe it was Governor Decrete, he said, look, you need to put an environmental impact study here. We need to find different areas in this region to put a power plant. And the Buck Hill site, as it was called 30 years ago, it was deemed the worst place to put a power plant of all of the sites available.
Mm-hmm.
And they've decided now, well, let's just put it there. And because no one has ordered an EIS, there's no record for this plant that it's okay to put it there. And it's discouraging that the governor says trust the process, but in administrations in the past, governors have said, let's do an EIS.
Right.
And so I respect a lot of people saying, well, the governor trusts the process, but I'm not really sure if they know what the process is.
Right.
Especially when you look at OSP that was built 30 years ago.
Well, and I also want to point out, as I've been on the periphery involved in this and following this, I've gotten to know folks in the community, and again, folks know how I feel about this. I feel very strongly that the people of this community have been just taken over the coals in the last 3 years, financially, philosophically, in many cases mentally, because of the stress that this introduced. I constantly listen to, and I'll take an example. I had the opportunity to be on Jim Hummel's show, Lively Experiment, about last year, and the gentleman who's the editor of the Providence Journal said, well, we have to have power somewhere. And I pointed out that, well, okay, let's build it on Blackstone Boulevard. And he scoffed, of course, and that, that type of scoff when they say, oh, you silly.
Oh, when you think of
that. He huffed and puffed at least 2 or 3 times. But the point of being, you guys have already paid up there your energy dues. This is not a community that's been allowed to go unscathed by big energy production. Actually, hosting some of the most onerous facilities in the state. So the notion that somehow, this is a NIMBY response is bulb leap.
I don't believe it's NIMBY at all, and I know some people have said it's bananas, which is my personal favorite of all of the acronyms, but climate change knows no borders. Pollution knows no borders. Those trucks going from Johnston up to Burrillville, they're going to go through Smithfield. They're going to go through North Smithfield. That water source, which is, as a Situatonian, is the crown jewel of our town, is going to be used for this. There's so many things wrong with this project that transcend environmentalism. Yes, I am an environmental advocate. Yes, I believe that we need to go and transition off of fossil fuels, but there are so many things wrong at this table that the table needs to be burnt down.
I'd say that. Now, there were, convened by Speaker Mattiello, there was a multiple meetings held to recast the Energy Facility Siting Board. And again, I want to point out I believe, and again, correct me because I'm running off of memory here, in the state of Connecticut, it's a much larger representation.
Yes, the siting boards throughout New England are different. So in Rhode Island, it's 3 people. I don't know the numbers right off of my head, but other communities have 7, other states have 5. They require public input. They require DOH to have a bigger say at the table. Department of Health, their DEM to require things. So yes, Speaker Mattiello did, when we were trying to push through EFSB legislation to reform the board, they decided when that legislation didn't pass in the Senate that there would be a study commission. And so the study commission was fair. Doug Godlinski was on it. He is the chair of TECRI, which is a fossil fuel industry company. He is a lobbyist. We also had the building trades had a seat at the table. And also John Pacheco, which was the president of the town council up in Burrillville, Paul Roselli, which I think many of the listeners know about Paul's contributions, and Jason Olkanowski had attended Conservation Law Foundation. So there were a lot of people.
It was a genuinely representative mix of, I guess the term now is stakeholders.
Yes. So our Representative Cale Keeble in Burrillville, when he was chair of the this board, he made sure to have representatives from across the state. Art Handy was also there, representative from Cranston.
And I got to say, Kel Keeble strikes me as one of the good guys up there. He's very fair.
I think without Kale's ability to understand the magnitude of this project, then we wouldn't have been able to come as far as we can at a state level, and I'm very thankful for him as a legislator for doing that.
And here's a guy, you know, he's politically of a different stripe than I am, but here's a guy who's arguably, without doubt, a brilliant lawyer who could, quite frankly, live quite happily ever after, you know, limiting his activities to the dreaded private sector and not contribute to the state as much as he does. I mean, here's a guy who just seems to be in it, actually is in it for just because it's the right thing to do.
Right, and I think a lot of the people that are involved in this mission are doing it because it's the right thing to do. I think that a lot of the people who have spent hours at the State House on the FSB legislation we're speaking about, they're doing it because it's the right thing to do. They're speaking to their communities. They're going to town and city hall meetings saying, look, you need to sign this ordinance or this resolution. We don't want this project. It doesn't matter that it's in Burrillville. It affects all of us. And I think that's a huge part of this is it's a statewide opposition.
Mm-hmm. So where does that stand now in terms of, you know, reforming, if you will, the EFSB?
Well, the legislation did go to the House floor. It was voted in. Unfortunately, on the Senate side, it was heard by, I believe it was, oh goodness, it was Senator Lynch Prada's, I believe that was, no, it's not Judiciary, it could have been Judiciary.
Yeah, she's Judiciary.
Yes, thank you. It's been a long day. It was heard by her committee, and unfortunately it died in committee. And we could talk about how inappropriate it is that when legislation is introduced to a committee that it's automatically voted to be, you know, held for further study, because this was legislation that has hit the House and the Senate several times, but it did unfortunately die in the Senate.
I mean, that's, given the careful attention paid to it. I mean, at almost a bizarre, un-Rhode Island-like level. Because again, you had input from the entire community. You had input from both sides of the aisle. You had House leadership clearly behind it at some level, willing to go forward. We have an election coming up, and elections have consequences.
Yes.
And this, to me, was, as they say in the mortgage commercial, the biggest no-brainer in the history of man. There was really no reason, and maybe you can inform me what their objections were, if in fact they were even under our twisted legislative process to provide objections. For the love of God, how could you vote against this?
And that's the thing is it never even got to a Senate vote, a floor vote, which is really discouraging. I know I reached out to Senator Lynch Prada several times. I am from Scituate, so I'm from District 21, which Nick Kettle did depart in, I believe, February of this year. So my community had no representation at the State House on the Senate side. So I reached out to you know, the Dean of the Senate, also known as the President. I did reach out to Senator Ruggiero's office. I did reach out, and I know many people reached out to Senator Lynch Prada, and unfortunately it was not voted on, and so therefore it did not go to the Senate for a vote. Incredibly disappointing, but it just, remember, you know, there are bills that it took several sessions for it to go through.
Right, but you know, at the same time, you know, an effort that I was intimately involved with was the cost of baseball stadium. And I just want to point out that on one summer's eve, I sat there and watched, and it was kind of, it wasn't a good look. I watched Senate leadership literally jog down to the Senate well after a 40-second Senate hearing to pass through a damn baseball stadium. You know, I mean, again, you know, it's always going to be my role to conflate that issue with, you know, that's the look that the periscope I look through. But how in the hell can you have that type of energy geared towards a private enterprise, and let's just leave that hang there, and yet at the same time, something critical to really, as you point out so aptly, the entire state.
What is the priority of the Senate? What is the priority of the President of the Senate?
Mhm.
These are questions we should be asking, and we should be holding our senators accountable. Having a conversation with your representative, making sure that they are aware of energy policy and understanding that it is truly something that affects us every day. You have to keep your
Mhm.
lights on. You have to charge your cell phone, but people say those things thinking, well, you need to put your cell phone on. How are you going to charge that? Well, we're going to charge it by using renewable energy. We're not going to charge our phones anymore by fossil fuel energy. People don't want it. They don't want the dangers of it anymore, and we need to let our legislative bodies know that. And if they're unwilling to represent us fairly, then that's what elections are for.
Yeah, and Sam Bell, for example, will replace Senator Jabour, who, as I remember correctly, was on Senate Judiciary.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to see how that committee is recast based on potential leadership changes and potential electoral changes coming up. That's clearly, Senate Judiciary is one of those quiet committees to watch and to observe. It doesn't get the play, if you will, of the Senate Finance. We have a little technical issue here. Okay. It doesn't get the kind of noise that it should, because Senate Judiciary quietly is where our world gets changed.
I think that every committee is important. Maybe that's because I have an hopeful optimism about government. That some people may be a little more jaded than I. But
Who, thinking of anyone in particular?
but the EFSB legislation in the House actually went through the Natural Resources and Environment Board, which is a far cry from judiciary, but also I feel equally important. These are things that we need to pay attention to. And I will say this, the people of Northwestern Rhode Island know a lot more about how our state works than it did 3 years ago. And I think, unfortunately, something bad happening is sometimes what makes people pay attention,
Right.
But I don't think we'll ever forget it if something else happens.
Right. There is a, if you're an activist in this state, there in the last 7 to 8 years, there's been a handful of successful efforts which have really created sort of a roadmap to how to address these. The two that I can think of that are the most, I think, successful, both not just on an organizational level and a level of emotional and political maturity, but just on a scale of righteousness, are the No Newport Casino crowd, and who, again, for 30 years fought the expansion of casino gaming in Newport. Finally to see it go to, as we call it here on the coalition, Twin Riverton, who I'd like to point out, by the way, voted every time to increase casino gaming in Newport until Rutrow. I know more than one person who, when called upon to ask to fight the fight, were like, wait a minute, how do you guys vote 2 years ago? But anyway, no Newport Casino. And then, of course, the folks up in Burrillville who have again really displayed a strength and astonishing courage in continuing this fight on every level. And of course, I'd like to point out, there were a number of people involved in the fight against both the Providence and the Pawtucket Red Sox Stadium. The ending there was a little bit mixed because ultimately we lost to Paw Sox, but ultimately we dodged a $100 million bullet. And so in each of those three, and there's probably other ones, and if I've forgotten them, please forgive me, but each of those three fights, you had coalitions of people of different beliefs, check their egos at the door, largely, and focus on a handful of issues and fight, and not let the war of attrition get to them. Because that's, ultimately, it's this Glenn Close coming out of the bathtub that I use from Fatal Attraction.
And it's interesting when you mention the Tiverton casinos, because, and my thing is water. Being from Situate, I was raised to be a steward of the reservoir, and I was thrown into this because of that. But Mark Russo, who is a local lawyer here in Providence. He represented Invenergy in Woonsocket, and then represented Ben Water in Fall River. They're this, and when I asked him in Fall River at one of their city council meetings, he couldn't recall which company he was representing in both cities. So, I think I made my point clear there. But he also was involved in the Tiverton project in their water, getting water from Fall River as well. So as I said in Fall River, if you start giving into these companies and these projects when they're not done in the right way, and I'm not saying every project is bad, that's not, we want to see cranes in the sky for the right project and for doing the right thing, but if you allow yourself to be vulnerable like Fall River did and they've overcome that, you now have a target on your back that it may be possible that they'll consider using you for these types of projects.
Mm-hmm.
And that's unfortunately, where we are.
Well, I mean, if you look at the type of communities that are targeted, and Central Falls was a prison years ago. Mm-hmm. There was a community that was broken financially, and I think a little bit spiritually. Tough times, and as a result, they were able to kind of angle their way in and get that. And it becomes addictive. It's all about the jobs. What's the cliche? Good paying middle income jobs. Oh, please spare me. It has nothing to do with that. It's all about taking advantage of a community. West Warwick years ago dodged the bullet on a casino because, again, West Warwick, Arctic, great people, but challenged community financially. So let's pray on that. If you notice, these organizations never go to EG or Barrington.
Correct.
They don't. Because, and I'll play a little class warfare here, many of the people involved in them live in EG or Barrington, and they don't want this crap in their town.
Isn't that true NIMBYism?
Absolutely. And if you control the gold, you control where it goes.
Right.
And my remark to Mr. Acorn at the Providence Journal about Blackstone Boulevard. The East Side, I have yet to see that moment where the East Side walks up and volunteers and says, you know what?
Let's stick it right here.
These towns have done their part. This is a town that had a collective nervous breakdown about part of a cemetery being redeveloped into seven homes. I've got a long memory for this crap. It's just discouraging because ultimately we've got a campaign, and we're going to take a quick break for a second or two, and we're going to segue in a couple minutes into the campaign. These are the hard issues that need to be discussed during clearly a critically important gubernatorial race.
Sure.
And do we see these issues being discussed in a critically important gubernatorial race? No, we don't. We've got talk of bursting bathrooms and, loan programs.
We're pointing a lot of fingers.
Right. No one is, you've got the mayor of Cranston talking about the murder rate in Providence. You've got, none of this stuff, by the way, is unimportant. They carefully toe the line as not to appear silly to people who aren't paying attention. These are all issues, but are they the burning issues of the day? No, they are not. And as a result, the burning issues of the day take real courage and a willingness to do the right thing simply because it's the right thing, even though it may cost you politically or it may cost you in terms of what's Gina raised, $200 or $300 million? Is she at $1 billion yet?
A little lower than that, but she has raised.
If she could.
She could.
Yeah.
And then she has raised a significant amount of money.
Right.
For a gubernatorial race.
And I had an opportunity to again visit Mr. Hummel's show a week ago, and again I expressed publicly how grateful I am for that opportunity to kind of swim in those waters. I listened to people talk about Gina Raimondo's stunning victory, and I just need to point out for the record that if you're a sitting Democratic governor in the bluest state of America with a $7 million campaign war chest, with two opponents divvying up the vote, all right, 57% is not a landslide at all. And Mr. Brown and et al. And the opposition crew, I think, did a remarkable job of, on little or no money, Until the very end of the campaign, not a lot of media attention against a governor. And on the other side, you got a mayor who just simply did not have the fortitude or the guts to enter into a basic debate on the issues.
Absolutely. I think that, putting on my Our Revolution Rhode Island hat on for just a second, I think that there's a lot that's going on with this gubernatorial race as far as the finger pointing and the getting the ads wrong and we can't film in the right city.
Well, let me jump on that for a second. I want you to finish that thought. I've gotten to the point to believe, you ready for this? That by intentionally getting the ad wrong, you see, this is how surface level some of the analysis in this state is. You could argue that week about a couple of things. But one thing Trump and Gina have in common is their ability to sort of toss up silly, superficial issues to redirect outrage porn to, taking the spotlight away from real issues. So I'll just put out the thought there that it was completely intentional that she got that wrong. How's that for conspiracy theorists? With the understanding that, hey guys, it's wrong. And then watching the media have a collective nervous breakdown about balderdash, as opposed to, and watching another week of the campaign go by as we all debated cooler and warmer and not talk about UHIP, not talk about DCYF, not talk about Burrowville, not talk about the addiction the state has to gambling, not talk about the war on drugs, not talk, on and on and on and on and on. And that's how elections are won. They're wars of attrition now by two people who have, and here's the fascinating part, all three people running for office, I'm just going to focus tonight on Mr. Fung and Ms. Raimondo, have extensive records to vote on. It's rather unique in that perspective.
Yeah, I think that we can see what their policies are to an extent in executive roles. Being a mayor is the executive seat. Being the governor is also an executive seat. But what I'm disappointed about in this race on the Republican side is it appears that Mayor Fung has truly moved to the right on social issues. At one point he was pro-choice, and now he's not. And he's not talking about energy policy. He has opposed the power plant, which is significant. However, he doesn't speak about energy policy. We have no way coming from his campaign how he feels about offshore drilling, how he feels about EFSB reform. And I'm not giving Gina an excuse by saying this. She is talking about it more than he is. In Western Cranston, we had an issue, and that's right over the border for me. They were clear-cutting forests to build large-scale solar development. And I think that is, citing those types of projects isn't the right way to use solar. But on the other hand, if you go to Cranston, there are also some buildings that have solar panels on top. So while Gina is weak in a lot of energy policy aspects, or not coming to the table in the way that many progressives would like to see, Alan Fung isn't talking about it, period.
As we talked about prior to the show, Alan Fung's entire marketing campaign during the primaries was that he built Garden City, and the murder rate's too high.
Yes, and he has become more becoming for the labor movement. I think that him is now saying that he's not against right to work is him coming to the center a little bit, but we're going far to the right on other social issues. I think that if we really want to make a decision in our gubernatorial races, we need to ask them specifically about energy policy. We need to specifically ask them what they want to do as far as corporate welfare. What do we do if an outside company comes in and wreaks havoc on a community for 3 years? What would you do as in your leadership role to help communities? Because right now we're not seeing in the outskirts of the state anyone really talking about us. And I understand, Cranston, Warwick, Providence, Pawtucket, Newport. These are our communities that are full of people, but our water assets are in Woonsocket. They're in Charlestown. They're in Situate. They're not there. And without us, I don't know if a gubernatorial candidate can win.
We're talking about the election now, kind of segued into that.
Mm-hmm.
Are you concerned by Mayor Fung's sort of extreme focus on the immigration issues and his seemingly obsession with fighting the ACLU and his obsession with panhandlers?
I'm speaking as my own person right now, but I feel that sanctuary states are a way to put a Band-Aid on immigration reform that we need throughout our country. Mm-hmm. I think that he perseverating on sanctuary cities and sanctuary states isn't the conversation he should be having. It's the how do we get immigration reform. Right. I think that there's great legislation we had in this state to protect dreamers, which I do feel should be protected. Having undocumented residents be able to have licenses is something I supported because, let's face it, if you're going to get hit by someone, you should have a license.
And be insurable.
And be insurable, that's the next part of that. And I think that, especially as coming from an immigrant family, his fiery passion for this, that's like one of the only things he talks about. It is very interesting.
Right. I mean, just, almost in a sense, I want to be the last ones let in. I mean, and that's my words. As a libertarian, our stand on immigration is very, very controversial. Sure. Because as a political organization, the analogy I use is the floating rock, and people who've listened to the show have heard it before. But if the notion that we are on a floating rock through space, and through accident of birth, there's a group of people on this side of the floating rock that get to have lives full of fulfillment and freedom, and the people who got born on this side of the rock is compelling to me. I believe in the freedom of movement of individuals. I believe in property rights and your ability to host who you want to live there. I believe in the free exchange of people, ideas, and commerce. I believe that ultimately, by and large, the notion that illegal immigration is the increase for a variety of crimes when it's based purely on anecdotal evidence, when in fact the level of violent crime of people born here in the country is actually higher. I believe that I believe that folks who want to come to the country and participate in the economic system and support this country, quite frankly, I think we should be giving them big hugs and a lot of hope. Libertarians kind of counter their embrace of much more freer borders with a kind of, a distaste, if you will, for ultimately the state filling in the gaps right away and creating a welfare state. But at the same time, we believe that people are entitled to lives that are filled with their own, sense of self-determination. And you're right. It's kind of appalling that a first-generation American who has been, quite frankly, I mean, he went to a scholarship school and has been, benefited from the American dream at a very high level, and God bless him for it. I mean, he obviously did well in school and has worked hard, and his family worked very, very hard, would then turn his back on people is just kind of bizarre to me.
Yeah, I can agree with much of what you said there, that we want people to prosper in our country, and I think a lot of immigrants, whether they're documented or undocumented or whatever language you want to use, they're here because they believe in the American dream. They're here because they want a better future, and we need immigration reform at a federal level that encourages that growth.
Right,
and
exactly.
Talking about sanctuary states of, and this fear-mongering about sanctuary states, it's not having an innovative solution to a problem. It's just complaining about it.
Well, and in fact, when you look at both American foreign policy and American drug policy, when you understand that we are generating a significant number of undocumented cross-border population, what's the old line? before your time. There used to be a cartoon strip called Pogo, and the greatest line that ever came from it was, "I've seen the enemy and he is us." If we're going to have a drug policy that encourages narco-terrorism, and then we're shocked when people flee narco-terrorism and come to the United States, not just for a better life, but to survive. If we're going to be shocked that our foreign policy includes droning the freedom into a bunch of nations, one word, Yemen.
Syria.
So where are we? We're no shining white knights. We need to be.
Sure, and I think having that grandstanding about sanctuary states, or having, if you go on Alan Fung's website, you're going to see three things about his platform. I believe it's economic development, reform at the State House, and then Veterans Affairs. This is the person who wants to run our state, and he refuses to debate. Projo will ask him questions about things that I'm passionate about, the Reproductive Health Care Act here in Rhode Island to codify Roe v. Wade, because you said it yourself, we're one of the bluest states to a lot of people in this nation, and we haven't codified Roe v. Wade, which is kind of alarming. He refuses to comment on things like that when Projo asks what his stances are, and I think we, as his potential constituents, deserve to know where he stands, because that's what a leader does.
Well, and this is what's frustrating to me. Okay, you and I are both activists, all right? We different areas, but I can't wait to argue about my position with somebody. I just can't. I obviously think I'm the smartest guy around. Maybe not so much, but I think I'm right. That's why there's certain issues that I've spent a lot of time on, as you, and these aren't just responses I'm kind of winging. It's after years of careful thought and reading and study and analysis. So I'm ready to argue with anybody about issues like this anytime, any place, anywhere, anyhow. I just am. What are these people afraid of?
Perhaps they're afraid of agitating the wrong groups. And in Rhode Island, it's a very interesting state. We keep on talking about it being a blue state. However, I've been quoted in the press talking about how we're a purple state. To the outside world, yes, I know.
Oh, I get that. I understand.
Economically, we may be blue, but on social issues, we are very red. We have Democrats who are endorsed by Right to Life here in this state. Mm-hmm. Our state party will not stand up and say, if you're anti-choice, you don't belong in our party. So for a Democrat, at the last election cycle, if you were a Democrat-leaning constituent, if you looked at Gina versus Alan, at one point they were both moderates in their party, and one could argue, well, at least Mayor Fung is pro-choice. Maybe I'll vote for him because he's pro-choice. But now, is he trying to capture those conservative Democrats?
Right.
Is he trying to court by saying he, supports labor, those members of the building trades and other unions that, well, he's on our side and we don't like Gina, so we're going to vote for him? Is that what he's trying to do? Is he trying to strategize to grab, as we call them, the unaffiliated voters? Is he trying to appease people where they really don't like Gina, but they believe in labor and choice, or they don't believe in choice? Is he trying to get them to vote for him? And then that's why I think it's important. It's not guaranteed that Governor Raimundo will win Cranston. It's not guaranteed that she'll win Cumberland. I would hope so because of Lieutenant Governor McGee, but that's also your town. Who knows what will happen there?
You look at someone like Fung, and I don't see him doing particularly well. I see Joe Trillo taking a lot more votes away from Fung right now than being given credit for. I don't think the current round of polling is accurate. Mr. Trillo is going to be on the show next week, so I'll give him the opportunity to opine on that. But I just see both major party candidates as spectacular failures.
I'm very disappointed And as a Matt Brown supporter, I would hope that the Gina camp, the Allen camp, that Gina's camp understands that they need more than just the urban areas in this race. To speak to the Republican side, Pat Morgan hasn't endorsed Mayor Fung, which is, I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if she endorsed Trillo. But I agree with the fact that Trillo will siphon away from Fung.
Right, right. I mean, Democrats, for the most part, always come home.
Sometimes, yes.
Well, I mean, they, at the very end, there's such an aversion to, I mean, and Fung has to run against the president. And that's not going to be easy.
Yes, I think he's aligned himself too much with President Trump on a lot of things. Some people call him, Trump Jr. Some people call Governor Raimundo, Hillary Jr.
Well, and I think also, I'm not sure if people are aware how close Speaker Mattiello is to Mayor Fung.
They have mailers together.
Right, but I'm not sure if the general public.
That's true.
Remember, you and I are in the bubble.
That's true.
We.
Well, driving through Western Cranston to get here, it's amazing how many Fung signs are right next to Nick Mattiello signs, and then down the street you have a Frias sign with a Fung sign. So there are Democrats right now, which I don't necessarily agree with, saying that we should all have Frias signs on our front yard. Because Mattiello is so polarizing in the House.
Well, and are you a Seinfeld fan at all?
Yes.
All right. So are we, in fact, in Rhode Island at this point, rooting for laundry?
Sure.
If you haven't seen the Seinfeld episode, and I'm dating myself with the players, but he would list off a number of mid-'90s Yankee players who would become like Johnny Damon. He's a Red Sox. We hate him. He's a Yankee. We love him. All right. It's that has never been truer, and that's why Maura Walsh's race was so bloody confusing because, what they were thinking. Are you old enough to remember? Well, you're not. But when Hugh Grant was on Jay Leno after getting caught in a compromising position, at the time dating, the leading supermodel on the planet. Jay Leno turns to Hugh Grant and, what were you thinking? I mean, holy cow. I mean, Maura Walsh, whether you agree with her politics or not, has, from an outsider's perspective, a compelling, and I believe this to be true, a compelling record of constituent service that is tough to match in most districts. To think that you could parachute in a Trump supporter into the Democratic primary, and again, what is our mantra here? What could possibly go wrong?
Right.
All of a sudden,
the choice is yours.
I was at the Libertarian National Convention, and I'm on Salon and Slate.com. Yes, I read them. All right, every day, and I'm all of a sudden reading about Maura Walsh on Slate.com. I'm like, holy cow. I mean, I'm watching Captain Carl from Vibeco blow up the Republicans by taking the lieutenant governor, and then a man of high character, one of the smartest people in the state, the only person,
Carl's great.
the only person to vote against 38 Stadium. I'm sorry, against 38 Studios.
Correct.
All right, I'm watching that go on, and then I'm watching, and people are leading. I'm trying to explain it to people in the real world, the real political world, and when your puppy kind of gives you that cockeyed look, like he's not quite sure what you mean. Am I supposed to run for the stick or not run for the stick? Like that? Yeah. That's what people are doing to me.
No, Carl was great. What he did for voting against the stadium was great. Just that whole. The Republicans do things very interestingly in this state, but he's a great player here, small business advocate. So it's interesting though, going back to the gubernatorial races. These two candidates, and I don't want Ann Armstrong and Dr. Munoz Luis. I always get your name wrong, Doctor. I'm sorry. Trillo. They're contenders. They got their 1,000 votes. They have every right to talk about the issues. But going back to our three main players, they need to talk in debates about things. They can't just hide behind, Facebook ads or websites that have no information. We need to know where they stand on things, and energy policy is a big one that I'll be listening to. I suspect, and I have said this, that I will be supporting the governor. I don't know if other progressives will. I think that it's important to vote as you can, but I also know that supporting Mayor Fung in his current state, the way he has been acting, the more to the right he has been going, his lack of insightfulness on energy policy, on the war on drugs, on reproductive health, one of his administrations would hurt many things that I care about.
Right, and what's going to be interesting to me is to see in individual districts how many progressives support House and Senate candidates and simply holding their nose and walking away and not voting for Gina.
You could say that too about Sheldon Whitehouse and Judge Flanders. I mean, the judge has said some things. If you're a Democrat, you're pretty much a socialist. I'm not a socialist. I may like Bernie Sanders, but he's not a socialist either. And talking about that race, Flanders has talked about prescription drug issues in this country, and it was Senator Sanders who started first talking about that, not the senators like Cory Booker, who Pfizer is in his back pocket, or Kamala Harris, but it was Bernie who started talking about that, and now all of a sudden Judge Flanders is talking about it, but in the same breath, if you're a Democrat, you're a socialist. So I know that there are a lot of people angry with Sheldon Whitehouse, and they don't want to vote for Judge Flanders, so they may not vote, period. And it's important that these endorsed state and federal level candidates are aware of that, and that it could affect their races. The Anyone But Gina crowd, that was an interesting thing. Center for Freedom and Progress, Mike Stenhouse's group, they were really pushing for, be a D and then vote for Matt Brown and then, slaughter him in the general, and that didn't happen. But I don't know what will happen in the general as far as those voters.
It really is. I mean, it really is a complete toss-up at this point. I think anyone who thinks they know the result, I think most people think Gina's going to win. I don't know.
It's not going to be easy.
And or millions. I mean, one of the more compelling parts of the poll today was that as many people have a very poor opinion of her, as they do a highly regarded opinion of her. So she's got negatives that really approach Hillary Clinton. I mean, it's the analogy, or I should say the comparison between the two, on a lot of levels, is compelling.
Yeah, if we want to go down that path, I mean, our Revolution Rhode Island is the Bernie Sanders inspired group here on both the national and state level, and Bernie carried our state by 12 points in the primary in 2016, and then we did vote for Hillary in the general, but that worked here in Rhode Island. That did not work in other states. For instance, Northwestern Rhode Island, they voted majority for Bernie in the primary and then went straight to Trump in the general. So it's important here to know that Hillary Clinton, there's the infamous discussion between Greenpeace and her where she starts saying, Bernie Sanders, sent you here, and it was a very emotional or thought-provoking video. And we see the governor doing the same thing to the Sunrise Movement, saying, Matt Brown brought you here. And the first thing I thought was, here we go again. This is the same thing. And I know that many progressives don't know what to do. And will they be enough to make it be a Fung win? I don't know. I think it's too soon. We don't have enough polling. We had almost no polling for the primary.
And what's insulting to me about those situations is twofold. Number one, the "it's all about me" moment by the candidates, and also the tacit insult that somehow folks in a number of the movements that you're involved in are essentially drones dictated to by a candidate who, who go out there and just follow orders and aren't. I mean, quite frankly, when you look at folks of your generation, you've been out there for several years now, and you look at people of mine and Pat Fonte's generation. In her case, she's been out there for decades.
Right.
So to assume that somehow they're following orders is really, it's marginalizing at best. It's insulting at worst.
Yeah, and I think that there is no such thing as a perfect candidate. The only perfect candidate is you if you're running because you're running.
Mm-hmm.
So while I have some I don't trust Gina in some of her policies, and I don't agree with some of her policies, and I will constructively criticize those policies. I don't think it's fair for us to say, well, you're criticizing someone, that means you don't support them, that means you want a Fung governorship, because, I mean, I'm just going to say right out, what does Fung stand for? Where can you see what he stands for? And he's not debating, and he's not answering when Proja wants to talk to him about things, and all we know as far as Burrillville is that he's against it because of land use, which is a fairly, local control and land use is a fairly libertarian ideal. Right. But there's so much more than local control when it involves the power plant.
Well, if you look at the national elections, I think the analogy is clear. The national election, what it really came down towards the end with the two principal candidates was Hillary, I'm not Donald. Donald, I'm not Hillary. And when you look at locally, unfortunately, it seems to be going down to that same issue. I'm not Gina, I'm not Fung.
Right. And then Trillo's just like, I can't keep the boat afloat.
I think he's going to shock a lot of people. I don't know that he wins, but I think he's going to shock a lot of people.
Sure.
Because I think there's a significant amount of independent voters who are out of disgust with the two primary candidates are going to vote elsewhere.
Sure.
Vote with their feet.
Sure.
And I don't use the word disgust lightly. It is, I can't think of a less inspiring general election in a more important year than my lifetime. I mean, there is, yay, when you look at
We've been talking about midterm elections since the 2016 election.
Right.
So, and I think that Langevin will be fine. I'm not really concerned about his race. Sheldon has a lot that he needs to work on, both environmentally and for other parts of his policy. But Flanders just likes to say you're a socialist, and that doesn't really sit right with me. But it's really gubernatorial, and then the House and Senate races.
Are there House and Senate races that you're looking to that you find compelling?
I'm interested in the Coventry district. I believe it's District 29 and District 28. So also the district that Bobby Nardolillo left to run for senator. That's going to be an interesting race. There's a couple of Senate races, Guy versus Bridget Valverde. That's going to be an interesting race. I believe Senator Morgan has a race that I'm also watching. I think that Kale has a race right now. There are some pockets of races.
But I mean, do you think Kale faces any? I mean, given his performance over the last couple of years, do you think there's anyone who, other than rooting just for the purest? And what's always impressed me with the anti-energy movement is how it's crossed political lines. I mean, I've seen Trump signs next to no new power plants.
Absolutely, I think that the majority of the Burrillville Town Council, in their Republican, Democrat, and there is an independent there. I think that they're opposed and have come out strongly as opposed, not just saying that they're opposed. I think that Kale has truly been boots to the ground in his race, and I hope nothing but the best for him. His opponent has run several times. He has a very conservative platform. I'm not sure if beyond the power plant issue that we have today, if he would advocate as strongly as Kale would for energy reform. But there are other races throughout the state as well that will be interesting. Woonsocket with Mark Cody leaving. That will be a curious race. Melissa Murray, of course, is who I would support if I was still living in Woonsocket. But throughout the state, Deborah Ruggiero she has a tight race with an opponent that has a huge war chest, and she just said that she doesn't support Mattiello, so there goes that help.
Yeah, but do you think that was, in a sense, her way of trying? I mean, Marzlikowski is my state rep, and I got a thing in the mail from him talking about how he had fought insiders and leaders at the State House. And I'm like, really?
I think that there's a lot that happens at the State House that we don't know about, and that's really discouraging because as a Democrat, I believe in transparency, and I know some people may be laughing about that right now, but that's something I believe as a Democrat, and I would hope most Republicans would too, and Libertarians, of course, do. Green Partiers, we all talk about this, but unfortunately the fact is that there are a lot of background deals that happen at the State House, and he may be referring to something you don't know about, but he hasn't. Is he part of the House leadership? I know that he gets along with Mattiello.
Yeah, I don't know that he really represents anything.
Sure.
There's always you can't in any legislative body. There's to a certain degree there's limits on what a freshman rep can do or can't do, and so I'll give him points for that. It's funny because he is running against Brandon Bell, the head of the Republican Party.
Yes,
which is can't wait for those debates.
Mr. Bell is an interesting person. I've reached out to him regarding my town's GOP several times, and I have not heard a response back from him, which does not surprise me. They don't have many seats in the House and barely any in the Senate, so I can appreciate them trying to run. But what has Brandon done for the state?
I'm going to try to get him on during the season. I'll tell him you asked that and tell him that you said to give him a call.
Give me a call back.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear from you, Mr. Bell.
Hey, what the heck? So, first of all, thank you for coming in tonight.
And thank you.
This has been wonderful. We have to do this more often.
Sure.
Because again, because you're so involved. And yet you're so transparent on issues. There's a perspective that you bring that is really important for the conversation, because you give it a validity that would not have otherwise. I think there's too many pundits who talk to other pundits, who somehow think punditry is a source of information for people when all we're doing is observing other people's observations. I like that. My first concern in the next legislative session, I think, is going to be reviving the Energy Facility Siting Board bill. I think that needs to happen from almost day one.
Absolutely.
I would ask, and this is not marginalizing any other movements, but clearly there are a number of movements within the progressive world and somewhat within the libertarian world that people approach with a degree of ferocity. I think that is one of those stealth bills that people don't understand until one day they wake up and they've got that gun pointed at their head. And by then, very often it's too late.
Absolutely.
We learned a lesson this time around that how we cite big energy facilities simply doesn't work.
And as we're wrapping up, the importance of EFSB reform, many people say, well, if you get this passed, then this plant won't happen, and that's not true. Clear River Energy Center, that 2015 docket will be grandfathered in. The importance of the EFSB legislation is when we win, which I think we're going to kill the plant, but the fat lady hasn't sung yet. I think making sure that this nightmare never happens again for the state of Rhode Island is important, because until we have EFSB reform, this could happen in northwestern Rhode Island, this could happen in Tiverton, this could happen in Charlestown potentially. There was a nuclear power plant there. We have potential to make sure this nightmare never happens again, and no one should have to go through this ever again.
Right, absolutely. Let's stay in touch on this.
Absolutely.
Because you know what, the elections are going to come and go, as they always do.
Sure.
There are a couple other interesting races. There's some Libertarian Party guys running directly against progressive Democrats.
Yes, it's going to be an interesting general election.
I mean, just from a standpoint of political theory, Darrell Gould is going to be joining us in a little bit. You are rather unique politically because you give a lot of time to engaging the libertarian platform. You've engaged in analyze and spent time being, really a thoughtful understanding of all these different political groups. Diametrically opposed? Is that too strong a word when you look at someone like Jason Knight versus Darrell Gould?
I think that'll be interesting if they debate what will happen. I don't know enough about Representative Knight to make an educated decision about his race. I have too many other races running through my head. Mm-hmm. But I do think that libertarianism, little L, not big L. See, I do know what I'm talking about sometimes.
Oh, no, you know all the time.
I think that it's important to know, especially with our revolution in Rhode Island, we do invite libertarians. There is a such thing as social libertarianism, which isn't very popular within the party, but it does exist. It does exist.
Yeah, we know.
And it's important that we talk about the issues, we talk about the policy. There are plenty of Democrats that run in the state that aren't true Democrats. We see in Utah there are plenty of plenty of Democrats who run as Republicans because they have the reverse issue we have. Mm-hmm. So I think that in some organizations there are places where we can meet in mm-hmm. the middle. Just for a minute, some things I wanted to mention.
Absolutely.
Tomorrow morning, the No New Power Plant Group, which is an offset of the Burrillville Land Trust, they are having a fundraiser and car show to benefit the Conservation Law Foundation. Mm-hmm. That's going to be up in northwestern Rhode Island. I believe it's on the Gloucester-Burrillville line at the Field of Dreams. Check out Keep Rhode Island Beautiful. Their Facebook page has an ad right now for that event. Also, the Progressive Democrats of Rhode Island and my organization, Our Revolution Rhode Island, we are co-hosting a wrap-up of the primary election and then moving forward to the general. So if you want to come and see what we're all about, that will be on October 2nd. Check out our Facebook page for more information. I'm really excited for that because we're talking about Gina, do we support Gina, do we not? Within the Progressive Party, and so that will be interesting. But at this point, my priority are those House and Senate seats. Sam Bell won in District 5. I'm sorry, House Senate District 5. Marcia has still stayed strong, and I think that the races that you speak of are important. Hunt is running against Lofton, mm-hmm. which will be an interesting race. A Working Families Party endorsed candidate against the Libertarian candidate.
Hey, there will be debates.
Yes.
League of Women Voters, I believe, is going to be hosting at a minimum debates.
Yes.
We'll certainly be sharing the video because we're not afraid to debate.
Yeah, debate is a part of democracy. If you want to have a seat at the General Assembly, mm-hmm. where debate happens on the floor, you need to be able to debate in the public forum outside of that arena. And
on the floor, in the men's room, in the there's an old saying: "In the halls of justice, justice is in the halls," and right. That's. I mean, if first of all, if you're a Rhode Island voter and you've never attended a hearing, any of the committees, I will say shame on you, because just sitting there, it's even if it's not an issue you're pursuing, understanding and watching, just quietly observing how things work is a critical part of the voter education process.
Yeah, and I think it's. I will say this though, as a normal 9-to-5 worker, it's really hard for me to get to that state house. It's really hard, and I think that we have an issue in this state that we're not making Smith Hill accessible to the average person.
The simplest level, the parking.
Yeah. The parking, I'm going to rattle off some of Aaron Regenberg's legislative ideas, but parking, childcare. We have an opportunity here that we have CCRI students that are in early childhood development classes that they could be spending clinical time, and again, affordable, not paying a lot of money, giving them experience. We could be tapping into those resources. We need parking. We need lobbyists to not be the ones who are literally getting paid for what they're doing, getting the first spots, because there have been so many nights I've been at the State House not knowing what's this thing called Rise of the House? What's that?
Yeah.
And then finding the room, and then making sure there's space, making sure your name's on, making sure that the legislators on the committee are actually there, and getting that slap in the face when you start where they say this bill is being held for further study. That needs to be reformed as well.
Well, and the notion of suspending the rules as far as when bills can be advertised and not. I got into a kerfluffle over the soda tax with the Senate president, who objected strenuously when pointing out that the bill had been announced 48 hours before. And you know, we count amongst our sponsors the Aqua Soda Company, since 1915. The notion that he found out that there was a bill up for debate which would have effectively put it out of business. He found out in one case from a friend, and another case from me.
Right.
So I told the Senate president in no uncertain terms, politely, voices were raised, I don't care about your process and procedures. That doesn't make them ethical and does not make them appropriate.
Right.
And you're right. I mean, if there's ever a building that needs an enema, it's that one on a clinical level.
And I think we need, and again, the majority party needs to be there with younger people that are willing to say, why are we suspending the rules? We start our session in January. There are bills that are introduced in January. Why are we waiting until June to hear everything in a mad rush of let's just vote in all of the things? That's not very democratic at all.
No, it just, in the large D sense, it's not. Yeah. It needs to end. And
it's in the little D sense, too.
And the big L sense, too. Listen, all I can say is if there was a libertarian up in that house, that would be...
You had Blake.
No. Libertarian friends don't let libertarian friends go Republican.
Oh. I'm excited to see him be the House Minority Leader. I think Blake has really come across the table with, DACA, that he co-sponsored some legislation. He's been, when I've reached out to him for power plant things, he has been amenable.
Blake is very, very intelligent. He doesn't need me to say that. Blake is a very accomplished individual, and I think, he's got the potential for great things. He just needs to, we all go through these periods.
Maybe he'll be a libertarian again someday.
Come
back home.
That whole, when you remember the Republican Party, and I do believe the Republicans nationally are having, they don't know it yet. You never know until it's too late, but they are having their Whig Party moment. It's a challenge to be a libertarian in a state like Rhode Island.
Absolutely.
It's a real challenge. It's one of the most difficult, we're going to talk about this in my next segment, but it's a challenge. There's a lot of institutional barriers towards any independent political movement that need to go away. No, I think Blake's going through his political teen years, and at a certain point he'll get done with political puberty and he'll grow up. Anyhow, however, again, thank you so much for joining us, folks. Alicia and Kelly of really every organization that matters in the state joined us tonight. Thank you for spending your Friday evening here. We've covered everything. We're going to stay in touch with these issues because you and I chat all the time.
Yes, we do.
Like I said, I think you and some folks that you're friends with are going to be on sometime during October, and we look forward to that conversation as well.
I am very excited to hear that.
All right.
I'm excited too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We're going to take a quick break right now. I'm going to come back in just a second. Daryl Gould is going to be joining us in a few minutes. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, 90 Way Boston Street, deep in the heart of the city we love, La Prave, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories, as is Rhode Island. Alicia and Kelly joined us. We talked about everything, I think, at this point. Yeah, we really covered everything, anything that matters. But joining me in a few minutes, Daryl Gould. He is running for your General Assembly against some guy named Knight. And I believe what's going to be one of the more compelling, more brutally honest conversations that's going to be had in state politics in this generation. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, CoalitionRadio.us, and our all anti-billionaire baseball boys club, apolitical feed, home of the Pawtucket Paw Sox participation trophies at Pawtucket is home. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here on the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, 90 Way Botza Street, in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. Please like it, please. Please applaud. Well, that was George Bush, Jeb Bush. Coalition_radio on the mighty Twitter, and coalitionradio.us. Gonna take 5 minutes out for what I always call my yacht club moment. Of course, I'm enjoying the new grapefruit seltzer. It's delicious. It's a great mixer. It's strong on its own. Hints of grapefruit, all natural grapefruit used in it. No sugar, no salt, no crazy chemicals. This is not, by any means, your refinery style soda in the big plastic jugs. Clear glass, delicious taste. Folks, Yacht Club soda, 1915? Yikes. Yeah, Rhode Island's boutique soda before Rhode Island even knew it needed boutique soda, with its new spiffy caps, because they are, as designated by your General Assembly, the official Rhode Island soda. So I just had to make a comment tonight, and joining me just a couple minutes is Daryl Gould. Just had to make a comment tonight about, well, the whole notion of debate inclusion. This is a battle as a libertarian that we face nationwide. So I have to be supportive of my political brethren and sisters, regardless of whether they ascribe to the same political theory I do. I know, imagine that. Supporting things because, well, it's the right thing to do. Not taking momentary advantage because, well, they're a Republican, so we suspend the rules because they're a Republican, or he's a Democrat, so we're going to engage in some twisted level of moral equivalency. No. You see, the airwaves belong to you, the public, you, the voters. In some satanic moment, generations ago, it was decided that a handful of large corporations would have control over these airwaves with some sort of Byzantine licensing process available for those who wanted to play. So they've got the notion that somehow they get to set corporate rules and they get to decide who's included in debates. There are several people who, quite frankly, have worked hard and deserve to be in these debates. I don't care what your corporate status is. I don't care what your corporate mandates are. The word policy is irrelevant to me. I see the word policy, I break it because it's policy. So let's talk about a couple of these independent candidates who you deserve to be heard from. Dr. Daniel Munoz. I believe one of the smartest young forces on the political scene today. He's got a lot to say about everything from healthcare delivery to education. I don't agree with all of it, but it's well thought out, it's an articulate plan, and certainly deserves to be heard. Because hell, you're paying for this election, aren't you? The notion that the duopoly as we call them in the libertarian world, the notion that two political parties hold sway, are the sovereign rulers, are in effect the throne that we beg to approach? Balderdash. The Reverend Ann from the Rhode Island Compassion Party. All right? She deserves to be heard. Interesting viewpoints. I happen to agree with her on the absolute legalization of cannabis. She deserves to be heard. Why? Because in her case, in Dr. Munoz, as well in the principal players in the election, they took the time, have the organization, made the effort, and followed the rules to become candidates to be governor of the great state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. It's that simple. You set the rules. Now, all of a sudden, folks who claim to own the airwaves, you know, as a libertarian, on a superficial level, you might say, well, it's their television station. They get to do with it what they want. Well, not so much. I mean, you know, arguably it's their building, their cameras. So I have a simple solution. Let's eliminate the FCC. Let's make the airwaves open to all. And let free market solutions gain a toehold in this planet, and particularly in this country, and allow individuals to broadcast what they please. It's worked on the internet. We figured out a way in a free market manner to give people an opportunity to set up their own, if you will, landscape on the net. Hell, that's what we do here, isn't it? You know, I couldn't do this on network television because they own the airways. Oh, that's right, they don't. So I respect private property rights. I'm a libertarian. So in a real sense, they're right. They can set who gets to come on their TV station or not. What I say is we need to democratize the political process, not in the political sense, but we need to open it up to all. We also need to stop now, today, not tomorrow, today, public funding of two private political parties. We elaborated on this over the last couple of weeks with regard to the primaries. We're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not into the millions, to support two parties who have actively worked to prevent dissension, to prevent differentiating thought, who work very hard. In fact, it's one of the only things they're really good at is making sure no one else has a seat at the table. Reverend Ann deserves a seat. Dr. Munoz deserves a seat. They played by the rules that we set, and they have a right to be heard. And we as a society, as a body politic, as a state, call it whatever the hell you want, we have a right to see them debate one-on-one with the poobahs, who merely because of their association with two organizations, both of whom are complete sellouts, by the way, the Democratic and the Republican candidates, merely because they've got those letters in from them, they have been confirmed to have a level of credibility, which, let's be blunt, neither of them deserve at any level. I've had the opportunity to have a couple of conversations with our independent candidates. I will tell you that I would prefer them in a heartbeat to the mainstream candidates. So, A, let's kill the FCC. Because all they're doing is acting as a barrier to real conversation and to the freedom of exchange of ideas. First step. Number two, let's end public subsidies of political parties now. Now. The other notion that somehow because you become a political party, because you happen to have already been one, quite frankly, not because of any skill, you're entitled to public funds, millions of dollars of public funds. You'll hear more about that from us. The notion that Alan Fung gets how much money? And whose money is that? I didn't agree to that. I don't think my guest agreed to that. Darryl, I haven't introduced you yet, but did you agree to that at any point?
Completely.
Oh, okay. So, as we sum up, because I want to get Darryl on the line here, no to public funds for political parties, eliminate the FCC, open up the process, and if you are granted a license by us, there needs to be a much more stringent review, if in fact we can't get rid of the FCC completely, and end the monopoly on public thought, because that's exactly what we've done here. And in Rhode Island, the two mainstream political parties have taken it to a no low, because not only do they have a monopoly on public thought and the public discussion, they've used that monopoly to end public thought and public discussion. And that, my friends, is disgusting. So, without further ado, let me introduce our next guest. His name is Darryl Gould. He should be no stranger to the show. I consider him amongst my closest personal friends. He is a sponsor of this show. AirSciences.net has been a sponsor of the show for a couple of years now. In his day job, he provides mold remediation and fights biohazards. One could argue that he's trying to do the same thing in the General Assembly. He's running for District 67. He's running against a guy, well, this is the only name I'll name him tonight. He's running against a guy named Jason Knight. Now, there exists in two districts, and tonight we'll focus on 67, two districts, progressive candidates are running directly against libertarians on one-on-one races. So while the mainstream media might not list us in the compelling racist category, although to their credit they haven't come out with that yet to the General Assembly, so we'll give them the benefit of the doubt, I can think of no more compelling case, an analysis made for the alleged progressive. And by the way, he's not. My friend who was just on the show, she's a progressive. I afford her tremendous respect. We disagree on a lot of things, but I afford her tremendous respect for being intellectually honest and sincere. Mr. Knight, not so much. But I'm going to leave that up to our candidate, Darryl Gould. Welcome to the coalition.
Thank you very much, Pat.
All right, so you ran in 2016, first time out, got in excess of 30% of the vote, which was one of the top performances in the nation for a libertarian running a one-on-one against the Democratic machine in this state. What compelled you to run again?
It was certainly a little bit different. As you know, Pat, my district was held by the rep seat anyway was held by Jan Malik for about 18 years.
Held hostage?
And I'm sorry.
Held hostage?
Yes, exactly. And it was one of those situations. He ran unopposed a variety of times. I wasn't necessarily a fan of his performance. I think what Jan did well was, he really tried to take care of Warren, which is a town where we both reside. I think he fell victim of kind of a redistricting hangover. He was redistricted years before he lost in 2016, but he ran unopposed, so there was never any real application as far as seeing what that would do to his vote totals. For years, our district was predominantly Warren, and so all Jan had to worry about was taking care of our town. And then he got redistricted. It became a little bit more balanced. The reality of it is people in Barrington come out and vote a little bit more than people in Warren. And ultimately what happened was there were a lot of people, everybody talks about voting party lines and things along those lines, but people actually voted based upon town, which is interesting. The people in Barrington felt like they were neglected or ignored for a long period of time. Jason Knight, by all accounts, rolled out of bed and said, I'm going to run for office. And, in the give or take 5,000 votes that were cast, there were actually 900 people who voted for Jason Knight, Progressive Democrat, and also Jimmy Kazunis, who was a great candidate for as a Republican, simply because they were both from Barrington. So it was an interesting race. As you know, Janet Wade's kind of he was a little bit upset about the way that the primary happened. Knight got kind of dirty with him as far as textbook, mudslinging and take the old picture, throw the 5 o'clock shadow on it, and say Jan Malik wants guns in the hands of children and violent criminals, and seeing how much he could how much damage he could do with that kind of approach. And Jan got upset and ran a write-in campaign that was somewhat split the Warren vote to a degree. Knight would have won anyway, and I'll be the first to admit that. But I think it's a little bit, as I always say, it was a case study in politics because it was just really different from what you'd expect. That was my impetus to run in 2016 was I'm tired of somebody running unopposed who doesn't really represent me. And Jan was part of the leadership group. He was tight with Mattiello. And it went as we all are familiar with and would expect it to in Rhode Island. So now it's a little bit different. I think, my intention, quite honestly, and I know you know this, was probably, if you asked me 9 months ago, was I planning on running, it wasn't my focus. We've certainly seen that we can be effective in, eliciting change in this state through outreach and by, growing the Libertarian Party and getting our message out there. And that was really my purpose in running last time. There's a heavy weight on me as far as representing the Libertarian Party, showing people that we're not, because it happens all the time. And even this year, Malik said I was extreme right. You're talking to somebody who marched in Pride. I'm pro-pot. I'm not far right. We don't fall on that kind of left-right thing. And I think that a lot of people, existing politicians, don't understand how to engage us in debate because, for example, Knight, I'm better on some of the social issues than he is.
Right.
Just by proxy of being a libertarian. The beauty of being a libertarian is now I think that most people are starting to get understanding as far as what we believe. And even if it's the simple cliche of, don't hurt me, don't take my stuff, or recently Larry Sharp, who's a libertarian candidate for governor of New York, he's what I consider a leader in the liberty movement and a great libertarian. I think Larry put it best when he said, the libertarian view is you can be as conservative or as liberal as you want, as long as you don't force it on other people. And I think that's what really rings true. So now I'm, the catalyst for me running this time was quite simply seeing Knight's performance in the General Assembly. I've had the misfortune of having to see him sitting in the judiciary, the way that he talks to people, the way that he talks down, the way that he carries himself. For me, it's you're representing our district, not just in how you vote, but in how you behave. So for me, it was a matter of I'm more bothered by the fact that this man is representing me at the State House than I am that I lost him in 2016. So this time it's going to be a little bit different. I'm not so concerned with getting the, communicating to people what a libertarian is. Well, I'll certainly do that. And the beauty of what we believe is that it's a principle. You apply to everything. So there's no guesswork. You don't have to wonder where we stand on any issues. And I'm very happy to say that I've, when Knight proposes legislation that, on the gun control side of things, where he's infringing upon our rights, constantly protected rights, that, could be up there with 3,000 other pro-2A people. It's fantastic. And, unfortunately, we win some, we lose some. Whether it's the Paw Sox Stadium or, a variety of other topics, I just, quite honestly, I see Knight as somewhat of a fraud. He's exactly what we get in Rhode Island, and it's someone going up there, and I think much of what he says is steeped in hypocrisy. He's someone who, advocates for gun control, but he's a defense attorney by trade, and he will brag about getting people off on firearm charges. So, and I get it. That's his career, and that's what he does. He does not have to take those cases. There's enough going on where you do not have to defend people, and when it comes to gun control, when it comes to gun charges, if that's the ground you stand on politically, like I said, I think it's hypocritical and kind of exactly what I expect from him, and I think it's what we're going to get in the future if he gets back in.
How did you take it when he decided to vote in favor of the stadium?
Well, I think it's their rights. I do not like generalizing and saying, putting groups of people in buckets, especially now. I say it all the time about, what is a Democrat in Rhode Island? They'd be Republicans some other states. And then you have Republicans who, don't necessarily represent what, their party espouses as far as party planks and stances on issues. So it doesn't surprise me when I, and it's somewhat of a, I don't understand how progressive, and I'll certainly ask them this in the debate, I don't understand how a progressive sits there and votes for corporate welfare.
Right.
Giving our tax dollars, he's all about the platitudes of, we need to roll up our sleeves and governments, people helping other people who can't help themselves. As far as I'm concerned, the owners of the Paw Sox were not a group that fall into that category.
Right.
At the same time, he votes in favor of the speed cameras in Providence, which is the tax on the poor. I don't understand what he believes and what he stands for. My guess would be and as much as he runs with the progressives, I don't think he's necessarily cut from the Bernie mold, and that kind of true socialist kind of approach to things. I think he goes where it's politically advantageous for him.
Right.
So, he gets a lot of money from gun control groups, Moms Demand Action, and the Coalition Against Gun Violence and all that stuff, and which is great. I'm not taking any PAC money, and I think that's something that is really, I hope to shine a light on, which is kind of what we do politically in the state anyway, is really how nefarious and incestuous the campaign finance thing is, as far as Knight is concerned, and a lot of the progressives. this whole working families group, there are, for people who have the time and the inclination and the stomach, if you start digging and looking into the money trail in these things, what it really shows is there's nonprofits that feed PACs and vice versa, and this is all controlled by a very small number of people. Las Benedencia who's running against Billy Hunt in '68. He's very much involved in this, and what the progressives are very effective at is basically monetizing an issue. They'll find something emotional, they'll start a group to support it, and then they monetize it. And so, Knight has, last I checked, probably $30,000 in his campaign account. It's much like Raimondo. Like, why? She has $4 million. Why do you need that much money? And where is it coming from? As you know, Pat, campaign finance is something that I'm certainly going to talk about it. A formal complaint was filed by one of Knight's cohorts in the Progressive arena. Someone who's a former town council in Warren. I have nothing to hide. I mean, I have a principled opposition to campaign finance because I know, I've seen firsthand, not just as an individual, as a candidate, but with working as part of the party and the PAC that we have as libertarians in the state. I equate it to when I was 12 years old and I was a Boy Scout for 2 weeks. I joined the Boy Scouts because I saw the commercials and I wanted to go and chop down trees and light fires and zip line through the woods. And I went on my second week, I went on a camping trip, and I learned very quickly that I couldn't blow my nose if I didn't have a badge for it. And so it's this kind of mindset of it's rules that are put into place, and I don't think they hit the mark as far as what you're trying to achieve. Clearly, depending upon your view, if your goal is to suppress third parties and independents and people who do what we do, then yeah, it's a very effective tool. Does it address corruption at all? No. I think it's BS, to be perfectly honest. It doesn't accomplish much in that space. We all know, people aren't being bought. The cap for donations in the state are $1,000. So no politician is being bought by $1,000. It's going to be all the stuff that you don't see. Whether it's like Alan Fung with his, getting his free office down at Garden City and such, and these backroom deals with developers, and the fact that this is a union state and unions drive everything that we do, and it's sad, and it's just the state of Rhode Island. So I mean, my campaign this time is really, I'm just shining the light on the things that people need to see.
Right.
And I know some people might not agree with what I say or how I say it, but my goal, what I don't see from Knight, which I think is sorely absent, and he's putting himself in a position by, quote unquote, standing against Mattiello, he's marginalizing his voice. So my goal, if I were to get in, I'm not looking. I hate the term lawmaker. I think it's not the purpose. Yes, is it part of the process? You shouldn't be considered lawmakers. And I mean, the reality of it is, as a libertarian, would anything I sponsor really see the light of day in a Democratic hypermajority? Probably not. So why waste energy and time there? I'm not looking to benefit personally from any legislation. And we see that, whether it's Jan Malik getting rid of the liquor tax so his liquor store can do a little bit more business.
Hey, elaborate on that for just a second, because that's, we're going to replay this and replay this and replay this. I'm going to stand out there with a boombox in downtown Borrington. Just elaborate on how all that went down, because, you want a fascinating study in government. That was it.
Well, Malik, and I don't disagree with the premise. Our tax structure in Rhode Island is cumbersome, it's complicated, it's oppressive. And so he basically pitched the idea of starting this, kind of working group to reevaluate the tax structure in Rhode Island and ease the burden on small businesses, which are the economic engine of the state, despite what the governor will tell you, and basically streamline this and make it easier for the taxpayer and the small business. And so tens of thousands of dollars were spent bringing in, very smart people who specialize in taxation. And ultimately what happened was they came out, Jan proposed one change, from all of this time and money spent on it, and it was to eliminate the liquor tax. I live about a mile and a half away from Malik Liquor in town. That's the self-serving stuff. We've seen it with lawyers in the General Assembly. There are lawyers today that advertise they wrote the book on drunk driving because they did. And I think it's wrong that you have legislators as attorneys up there writing legislation that they know has holes in it. And because they know this law inside and out, because they're the ones who wrote it and sponsored it and advocated for it, all of a sudden they then can say to their clientele, listen, I know the loophole. I can get you out of this. This shouldn't be an opportunity for people to advance themselves personally. And, I don't have examples of Knight doing that kind of behavior. I don't have any reason to think that he's not doing it at the same time. It's business as usual up there. So that's the kind of stuff that we need to shed a light on. What I don't see from Knight is him. I've never been impressed with his knowledge base as far as what's going on in the state. Back in 2016, I stood in front of a room full of Roger Williams students talking about my beliefs in my campaign, and Knight was there doing the same. And this is probably like September, so with the weeks before the election day. And Knight turns to me and he says, Darryl, what's the state budget again? Is it $8 billion? No, Jason, it's 9. Like, I don't understand how you run for office and not know that. I'm a data guy, I get that, so I'm going to lean more in that space than most. But how do you not know what the budget is if you're running for office? What I've also seen is, he doesn't advocate for our district. He advocates for himself and for certain special interests that he represents, that he gets some money from. But I don't see him advocating for people in our district. We have a school system that is really failing. And not that he's not on school committee, I get that, but you should be advocating the Rhode Island Department of Education for this district.
Right.
And that doesn't happen. He's been a virtual ghost, other than providing taxpayer money, grant money, to people in the district. And that happens to, he has an individual who actually writes his grants for him. She's a progressive. And coincidentally enough, the funds that come into our district go to events or causes or groups that basically are, for example, there's a theater group in our town that focuses on children's theater. Sounds like a great thing to give money to. It just happens to be a theater group that the children of all the progressives in town, their kids participate in that theater group. There's an event in town called the Warren Folks Fest. And it's a cool event, something that brings some people into town, shines some light on, who we are and kind of the cool little niche that we have going on here from like a artist and foodie area. And, the individual who runs that event was a Gould supporter in 2016. He got a $2,500 grant for his event, and there's a Knight sign in his yard. So it's just buying votes with public money. This is something we've railed against for years. I know you mentioned Blake Filippi. Blake is the only person I know who really openly and outwardly says, I'm not getting grant money. And he's caught flack for it. He's been kicked out of parades and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
But unfortunately, he's the minority. He doesn't, he's virtually alone on that issue. Because everyone else says, even though I don't believe in it, I have to do it. Because if I don't, then I may lose my election. I may not get the support that I got before. especially people in the getting it, and you cut them off. So, that's one of the things we see. We rail against UHIP and what a disaster that's been. That's not a program that I would support. That's obviously it's very anti-libertarian. This whole nanny state and welfare state mentality. But at the same time, we've made a commitment to certain people, the most vulnerable people in society. And so when things go wrong, I reached out tonight, through social media. I said, hey, and to believe it or not, I think it was January 2017, he had a post on Facebook that said, I looked into UHIP and the checks are going out, so I'm glad we've gotten this behind us, and we'll have to find out what happened. We're 2 years later, $150 million later. People still aren't getting benefits. There are dead people who are getting benefits. It's a nightmare. So I don't understand, how out of touch are you where you can stand there and say, we fixed this.
Right.
But that's the night that I see. Because we're involved and we see it. Mm-hmm. It is what it is. He's been very quiet on social media because when he does speak, especially on gun control, there are a lot of people who will attempt to debate him or question him on why he's doing certain things. So he kind of turtled on social media for a long time, and then when the campaign started kicking up, he's not even really talking about issues. To be perfectly honest, it's another example of not advocating. He's out there giving traffic reports. There was with the Gano Street exit and 195 was a nightmare, and it would take somebody like me, and unfortunately I'm all over the place, so I don't have to go to Providence every single time. But there were people commuting from Barrington and Warren. It would take you an hour and a half to get to Providence.
Right.
It shouldn't happen. And rather than calling DOT Director Alviti and saying, what the hell's going on here, and you need to fix this, it's, hey everybody, here's a traffic report. And it's not advocating. And you have, sycophants who are more than happy to, stroke his ego for supposedly doing something. But it's, telling us that he's going to keep giving us updates. That's not advocating. That's not fighting for our district. And that's what we need. These days of having these people just go up there and do the same crap that's been done by people for years. And, it's the whole insanity of doing the same thing over, expecting a different result. That's just gotten so played out in this state, it's not even funny. But it's the reality of it. And that's who he is. And, that's a large part of why I'm running. I don't like what he does. I don't like how he behaves. I think he's, like I said, very self-serving, self-absorbed, and I'm embarrassed that he's my rep. So ultimately, that's why I'm running in 18.
I was distracted a little bit. I had a listener who lives in your district complain about Knight going pretty much in agreement with a number of issues in the Attorney General's office relative to the war on drugs. It strikes me that he doesn't have a very good record on legalization. Where do you stand on issues like the opioid epidemic? Issues like marijuana legalization, cannabis, all that. What's your take on these issues?
Well, as a libertarian, I'm pro-choice on everything, and ultimately, I think it's not. The libertarian mindset is, as long as you're not hurting other people and infringing upon their rights and safety, you should be able to do what you want. If I choose to smoke marijuana, if I want to do heroin, I should have the right to do that. Now, it's like anything else. Once you cross a line where you start hurting people, if you're stealing to support the habit, if you're if you get behind the wheel and injure somebody, because you're under the influence of something, we have laws against that. And that goes back to the whole, I will not propose legislation if I get elected unless it is to repeal other legislation or reduce the regulations we have in the state on the business side of things. Mm-hmm. We have enough laws. We double down and triple down. we create specialized groups. There was legislation that was proposed 2 years ago that was going to make pizza delivery guys this protected group, because there were a few robberies of pizza people in Providence. So let's propose legislation so that it's a special crime if you rob a pizza guy. Well, why? It's wrong to rob. We have a law against robbing. We don't need to complicate this. And quite honestly, if you take that look at gun control, and I've spoken to attorneys about this, and the strict gun control, judges, for the most part, they're constitutionalists. They look at the law and apply it. And so what happens is, because we have such strict laws when it comes to firearms, so it's not, if you murder somebody, it's murder. Now if you murder somebody with a firearm, there's all kinds of different, legal, almost like multipliers that come into play, and all of a sudden there's some mandatory sentences and all this stuff. Well, and it sounds nice. So, well, yeah, we got really strict. The problem with that is we got so strict that the judges look at it and say, I can't, like this guy got pulled over and he had an ounce of marijuana on him, and there was a gun found. He might be looking at 25 years in jail. He didn't hurt anybody. Should he have had the gun or the marijuana? That's based upon law. That's already been determined whether it's illegal or not. Whether I agree with that is a different topic. But it's one of those things where the laws are so strict that the judges don't want to. They tell these prosecutors, you need to get rid of the gun charges, because I'm not going to send this kid to jail for 25 years for having an ounce of pot and you happen to have a gun.
Remember, this is a state that criminalized the sale of hypodermic needles, which had the unintended side effect of people, IV intravenous drug users, using shared needles, which led to an explosion in HIV. That's that's what we accomplished here in Rhode Island with more laws. This is a law that this is a state that for a while sunsetted the Good Samaritan law, which had protected people legally who were at the scene of a crime by reporting someone who was dying of an overdose. That's what laws do in this state. This is a state that encouraged the use of the jump out boys and a number of quasi-constitutional operations to stop and frisk people disproportionately in the inner city and people of color. I mean, this is a state that constantly passes laws that suck and create far more challenges to the community safety and far more challenges to personal freedom than anything. I mean, what's the worst in most states? What's the worst part about smoking drugs? Getting caught with it. I mean, and this is a state where the Attorney General, whom Mr. Knight has supported legislatively, where the Attorney General is on this reefer madness era jihad against people in the recovery community, people who are addicted, with no responsible safeguards to getting folks out of the prison pipeline. Mr. Knight's been an abomination. Let's take apart the fact that you're a libertarian and he's a progressive Democrat. That's well, I don't even know if he really is. He pretends to be, but again, as you pointed out, this guy voted for corporate welfare. He voted for the 10th wealthiest sports ownership group on the planet to get tax subsidies for a private entity. If that same company had been in the business of building, tanks or building building high-end condos, it would have been, oh my God, that's corporate welfare. If someone in a different political persuasion supported, oh my God, that's corporate welfare. But hiding behind the excuse that people wanted in his district, were people in his district supportive of this? I mean, before I complain about it, how do people in?
No,
go ahead.
Like anywhere else, it was overwhelming, and it's not that people wanted the Postocks to leave, but it was, we should not be using taxpayer money to subsidize this ballpark. There's so much data out there, and And I'm very proud of you and the other people in the Libertarian Party. We're very effective in getting that message out there. I think that, when the Paw Sox did announce the move to Worcester, there was a lot of finger pointing, and I think we were probably the only group that I'm aware of that stepped up and said, no, you can blame us. We did that. We did it for the right reasons.
Right.
And that's another example of not representing your district is Governor Raimondo. Our schools are failing in this state. Our schools are failing in this state because for a variety of reasons. But from a infrastructure standpoint, the lottery money that was all supposed to go to education, it doesn't. Everything goes to the general fund. It becomes pet project money and buying votes and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I found it really interesting when Knight, now again, you're here to represent your district. So Knight has been very supportive of Raimondo's $2 billion plan, which is about 20% of our state budget, for upgrading schools and infrastructure, academic infrastructure. It sounds like a great thing. The challenge with that is, Barrington has, depending upon where it is, what year it is, it might be the #1 or #2 school district in the state. They've done their due diligence, and they've done a great job of having the right people, investing in their education infrastructure. To that point, in 2016, I attended meetings about that's actually in now the middle schools, the new middle schools, a $68 million project. Barrington does not have a low tax rate, but people recognize that their school district is the crown jewel, and it's something that affects property value and everything else. And so they actually approved this school. It was the only school in their district that needed any help. The high school is fantastic. The elementary schools are great. This is one that was kind of dilapidated. Its time had come, and the town said, yes, we will do that. I have a real problem with someone who purports to represent that district who then supports Raimondo's plan. And I say that because this plan is basically going to help the districts that didn't do what they were supposed to do.
Right.
So if they let their infrastructure rot in the vine, and there's mold, and there's mice, and water leaking roofs, and just all the stories we hear constantly.
Exploding toilets.
Yeah, exploding toilets. I mean, it's one of those things where Barrington did their due diligence. So why should taxpayers in that district be burdened with a tax increase to support districts that didn't do what they were supposed to do and didn't do right by, the towns or cities that didn't do it should pony up and pay to fix their schools. Barrington taxpayers should not be subsidizing school repairs in Central Falls, Providence, Pawtucket. People might paint that as cold. Well, it's kids and it's education. That's part of the problem in this state. And we see it even with bond issues. When we see bond issues, the Democrats in the state have a real clear understanding of what works. They've been doing it for so long. So if you have, something, a new engineering school at URI, for example, or expansion, certainly, they'll use keywords like education, veterans, that elicit that emotional reaction. And everyone I know, everyone I talk to, anyone, no matter where they fall on the political spectrum, says, "Oh no, we could pay more taxes." Nobody says that. So that said, why do people vote overwhelmingly for these bonds every year? It's another example of just the way Rhode Island works. So my take on it is, do I think I'm going to get elected? You never know. It's my hope that change comes. I'm not somebody. I don't need the seat. I don't have the ego that needs to be stroked. I'm not looking to, gain political, capital or power or anything along those. I'm going, for the most part, I'd be going up there and with a group of people that I really don't like. But I think that's what's necessary. we say every year, this is an important election. And I think if it's not this year, it's going to be 2020, maybe 2022. If we don't start making some changes with the type of people we elect, then this state is going to go up in flames. I have a lot of respect for Riley, who's a candidate for treasurer. I think, you know, Raimondo and Fung are two sides of the same coin, to quote Bob Healy. They're not really that different from one another. They're coin operated, they're self-serving, it's all about political career and designs. So I think, you know, there's not going to be much change there. I think we had an opportunity with Bob back in 2014. What we took out of that was there are a lot of people who are disenfranchised. But we need to do something different, because if we, otherwise, you know, the pension situation, the fiscal state of the city of Providence, all of these things are going to come to a head in the near future. And the only reason why they're not is because people are suppressing information. And it happens at every level. I have, you know, in our school district, like I mentioned, we have major issues. We have a school district that, now we have a software platform called Aspen. This is where all the data for students is kept. You know, grades and, you know, everything academic that you could think of, all their personal information. One of the things that's tracked by Aspen is our disciplinary issues. And because our district, you know, we have people running for office who haven't done what they were supposed to do, the district, and they have allies with the superintendent, we have a district that is not reporting their bullying incidents for fear that it may have political repercussions. It's reprehensible. But it happens at every level. I'm really excited. I'm an option for people. Billy Hunt, he's an option for people. I think if Lawson gets in, I think the guy's too green. He's kind of a mini Regenberg in that he's never had a real job. He comes from money. So it's real easy to be principled and want to give other people stuff away when you've never earned $1 on your own.
Right.
But I think, you know, Billy's a great option. These are things, you know, I have somebody running for school committee, Chuck Thibodeau. Chuck is one of those guys, doesn't care if people like him or not. That's what we need. This isn't, you know, all about ego and the popularity contest. And these are people who are standing up and saying, we need to bring change. It's not, if somebody else would be willing to do the things that I want to do, great, I'll vote for them. Unfortunately, I don't have that. So that's why I decided to run. Mm-hmm. I'm the reluctant candidate. Do I want to do this? No. But I have jokingly say I'm Batman. I'm not the hero that we want. I'm the hero that we need right now. Not to call myself a hero. But it makes the point. We need people who don't necessarily want to be state reps, but people or senators or whatever the case is. We need people who just recognize what the problems are. They have a political aptitude. They stand for something. They have some moral ground that they're consistent with. Hopefully a philosophy, which quite honestly libertarians are the only one that I can really think of that would apply, where we're not, you know, we're consistent across the board on things. Mm-hmm. But those are the people we need to run. And until that happens, our state's going to continue to decline. We have people leaving the state at a breakneck pace. I see it every day at work. My company, like you said earlier, we fix environmental problems. Some of these problems are discovered during home inspections when people are selling their house. I always have conversations. Hey, you staying local? Nope, we're out of here. Rhode Island taxes my husband's military pension. This is the worst state. It's the worst state to die in. You know, the probate taxes. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts in Rhode Island, and people are leaving the state at a breakneck pace. It may actually affect our representation at the federal level if something changes. But and I know you've mentioned this in the past, if we don't fix this, the state is going to go up in flames. And there are certainly people who are happy to sit back and watch that happen, and hope we can come in and you know, grow out of the, you know, rise like a phoenix out of the ashes. I don't necessarily philosophically disagree with that, and maybe what's necessary, we may need that purge, The only problem is I live in this state. I run a business state. I don't want to be here when that happens.
Yeah.
My kids get educated in the public schools.
Right.
This is going to affect me on every level of what I do. So that's why I fight. That's why Billy fights. That's why you fight. We are out here trying, and we don't do it for thanks or recognition. We're fairly surreptitious about what we do. We're not looking to get kudos. We partner with people across the political spectrum, much like we saw with your guest earlier. And if you align with us on something, we'll support you. And like I said earlier, I think on some of these issues, whether it's the criminalization of drug use, we're better than progressives. And I think I sincerely hope that, and then not just me, I hope we start seeing some change. And even if everyone good gets in this time, it's still not enough. So it's my hope that going out there and talking to people, I think people are afraid of the political process, and I'm almost jealous at times of people who are completely disconnected. And I mean, it hurts the system and everything, but I don't know how not to care, and it's something that is a curse in my eyes at this point, because I'm in the worst place possible to have my point of view, because Rhode Island is, certainly where I live in East Bay, it's turning into a progressive toilet.
Yeah. Public service is supposed to be about people who want to help lives, not get one.
Yep.
Wow. So where can folks find out about Daryl Gould?
So I'm very active on Facebook. So if anyone wants to find me, you can find me there. My website is voteforgould, GOULD.com. You can make donations there if you so choose. I'm not coin operated. I've been very fortunate to have people who support me because I support them, or the case is that have donated to the campaign. That's something that if you want to do it, great. I'm not doing fundraisers every 6 weeks. I don't need a war chest. I'm just going out there, kind of naked, and saying, this is what I am. This is what I can do for you. I don't care who you are. Anyone, it doesn't matter where you fall on the political spectrum. I honestly believe that if you truly advocate for your district, then you are representing everyone. Everyone will benefit from lower taxes. Everyone will benefit from, strip mining Commerce Corporation. Everyone will benefit from the reduction in regulation and taxation and all the things that we stand for. And so I honestly believe that libertarians are probably the best choice. Obviously, I'm biased. Because, A, you know what we stand for. We're consistent in principle. And if you truly advocate, and that's what we do, and we have a track record of it, whether it's we're standing up there with 3,000 people and testifying at 1 o'clock in the morning on Second Amendment issues, or helping stand up for a business that's not even in my district, but Yacht Club, so one of your sponsors, Yacht Club Soda.
Right.
This is a man who has a 100-year-old business. The General Assembly named him the official state soda back in, I think, 2006. And because, bipartisan legislation, including Republicans who, purport to be small government people, you have bipartisan legislation that's going to basically double the cost of this business and by stroke of a pen put him under. And his senator and was actually one of the people who sponsored this legislation. It's mind-boggling. But again, that's the kind of the crux of what I think needs to happen. Whether people believe it or buy into it, that's up to them. If people are content with having a condescending jerk as their state rep, because he throws some of our taxpayer money around and it makes it seem like he's helping people, then vote him in again, by all means. But it's something where at that point, you're not helping.
We've got a special event coming up at the end of October at the Libertarian Party. Maybe you can tell folks about it a little bit.
So that is something I'm actually very excited about for a couple of reasons. It's the first and foremost, the speakers that we have. Jeffrey Tucker, and I know a lot of people outside the libertarian movement or the Liberty Movement might not necessarily know who Jeffrey is. I had the good fortune of seeing him. I watched a ton of video on him, but I had the good fortune of seeing him at Brown University probably 3 or 4 years ago. He came out with the Young Americans for Liberty group, and he's the gentleman's anarchist, is what I refer to him as. He is. When you hear about anarchists, you just assume you think like Sid Vicious and like punk rock, and it's just total mayhem. And there are anarchists that's not the view. And I think that he's a great mind. He's one of the leaders in the Liberty movement. The way he communicates things and the point of view and the perspective he gives people, even in a very short period of time, is really enlightening. Scott Horton, another, he's heads I forget the name of the group, Libertarian, whatever. there are a few of them. But Scott's, where he shines, is foreign policy. He's a great mind when it comes to that. He gives great perspective. He brings everything back and makes us really evaluate what we're doing and why and how much it costs and all of everything that goes with it. I know that we have if we can and I encourage anyone go to the LPRI website. You can buy tickets for this event. There's an early bird rate on this. Get in early. It's a full-day event. It does include dinner. There'll be a lot of great people there. I know a lot of people in the state who, prominent politicians, people who are interested in coming. And the part of the hope is if we can get enough of the early ticket sales, we might be able to beef up the lineup a little bit. But we'll obviously have other people who contribute, whether it's Skype in or recorded video or something like that. But it's an event that, really the first time we've seen anything like this in Rhode Island. I think it's going to be a lot better than having like Grover Norquist come to the state. But it's something I'm really excited about. I think it's a great thing for the Libertarian Party. It's a great opportunity for us to show, what our capabilities are, what we stand for, and the kind of people we can bring in. And again, just show people what we believe. Give people a different take on things. The libertarian philosophy is very difficult to argue against, unless you're a tremendous jerk. Because it's all about self-responsibility, self-ownership. Charity is part of what we believe, and I think that's something that gets lost on a lot of people. But again, this is an event where you get to see a lot of great people, hear a lot of ideas that you may not be exposed to, and you don't have to go and filter through all kinds of stuff on YouTube. This stuff is being served on a silver platter right here in Rhode Island. So I encourage anyone out there, look into the event, go to lpri.com, buy your tickets. If you have questions, reach out to anyone in the party. We can certainly talk about what it is and what we're doing. And if you want to help out or volunteer, then there's room for that too.
lpri.us/forum.
.us, sorry.
lpri.us/forum. And obviously that'll be all over the page. Darryl, listen, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to hear from you throughout the campaign. There is at least one debate already scheduled, right?
That should be two. There'll be one. I believe the first one is, I want to say it's Tuesday, October 14th. That is the Barrington debate. And that's going to be, for people who attended it last time, it's really a shame that more people don't. My personal opinion and feedback from people was that I destroyed night in the debate, and if everybody saw it, then I would have won overwhelmingly, because clearly I don't want to call myself a subject matter expert, but we've been living and breathing this stuff almost as like a full-time job for years. Like I said, I'm a data guy, so I like stats and stuff, so I can sit there and quote the stuff over and over again. It's not just, you're not going to have me sit there and talk about rolling up my sleeves and getting to work. When you roll up your sleeves, all you do is get a forearm tan. There are more pressing things to do in this state.
Yeah, and I think after 2 years, Mr. Knight has a record, and I think at this point all he should be getting is a participation award. Certainly not another 2-year free pass to sit there, interfere in people's lives, and at the same time really be a tool of the House leadership, despite whatever nonsense he might be spewing right now. And it is
Well,
nonsense.
since you're so enthusiastic about giving traffic reports, I would make Jason my honorary traffic guy if
Absolutely.
I do get in, and he can sit with me in the house if he wants, and if he wants to tweet out and Facebook, what the traffic looks like for people who don't have, phones and GPS or eyeballs, then yeah, I'm more than happy to extend that offer to him.
Excellent, excellent. Daryl, thanks you so much for joining us. Folks, we're going to call it an evening tonight. I first want to thank Alicia Ann Kelly for joining us earlier in the evening and spending an hour and a half or so with us, getting deep into energy policy, the politics of the election relative to issues like that. And of course, our current guest, Daryl Gould, who's running as a Libertarian in District 67. Really the party of knowledge, the party of choice. We believe in the ultimate rights of the minority, and that's the rights of the individual. And Daryl's worked very, very hard over really years now as a community activist, someone intimately involved with medical cannabis, involved in the Healy campaign, education reform, now as an advocate for the libertarian movement, and in running for office again. So Daryl, best of luck. You and I are going to be talking probably in a few minutes, but thank you so much for joining us tonight. And this and all other shows, this will be up and remain up on our Facebook page, so you can watch this right away. You can watch it all weekend. We'll get it up onto our Coalition YouTube page and coalitionradio.us. But it's available for review all weekend right there at facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. We invite your comments, your feedback, your debate, your discussion. Hell, your heated opposition if you want, because we encourage conversation, because ultimately the Libertarian Party is truly a philosophy, a movement, as well as a political organization. Folks, we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. The naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. We told a couple tonight from people who, while being on different sides of the fence, if you will, politically, clearly are people who hashtag take it very, very, very personally. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, are all anti-billionaire baseball, apolitical billionaire baseball boys club feed, Pawtucket Paw Sox participation trophy winners at Pawtucket is home, where we're going to continue to monitor the situation as it unfolds in the city of Worcester. Because you know what? Until, we'll stop watching it when they build the stadium. Right now, the city of Worcester is looking down at a $100 million subsidy, and I'm just wondering how that's going to play as it sinks in to their own unique version of either A, every boy's got to have a band, or monorail. Folks, Joe Trillo is joining us next week in what ought to be one of the more interesting conversations we've ever had on the Coalition. 6 o'clock, right here. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, or you can watch on GoLocalProv.com. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be back next week. Thank you.